Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku had metal bat ability? If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Men are not all made equal. It's the harsh reality of the world, which Izuku Midoriya had discovered when he was 4 years old and told to give up on his aspirations to be a hero due to his quirkless diagnosis. But he remained optimistic, thinking that despite the opinions of his classmates and the bully who had once been a friend, he might one day be able to become a hero. He would cheerfully save everyone and reassure them that they were safe because he was there, the same as All Might. Izuku was then told by All Might himself that he couldn't be a hero, that he should dream, realistically, and that his dream was shot down without hesitation. Izuku's life had taken a drastic turn after that. After that, his grades started to suffer as graduation drew closer, and his teachers started manipulating his grades so he wouldn't be at the top of the class anymore. His mother became ill, so he started working every spare moment to pay for his medication and doctor's appointments, but the only jobs anyone would give him were temp jobs that paid less than minimum wage and required a lot of manual labor. He also experienced worsening bullying. Now that his dreams had been dashed, Bakugo had started to ignore him and focused more on the UA entrance exam, leaving the role of Izuku's tormentor and bully open. He rarely made it home with his uniform intact, so he had to learn how to mend the cloth himself in the middle of the night before he got some little sleep to start the cycle over. Yorobi Shirahama, a quirkless man he met at one of his numerous job sites, was the only bright spot in his life. With arms larger than Izuku's and a thick lumberjack beard, he was a fairly cheerful man who loved hard work despite being older than Izuku at 27. A lot of people started calling him John Henry, which he politely accepted. Izuku was taught the ins and outs of construction, including plumbing and electrical, by John Henry, who treated him like a little brother. It was easy to teach Izuku because he admired his analytical mind and desired to understand everything. Outside of work, he also supported Izuku by spending time with him whenever he felt the boy appeared especially depressed and by giving him strength and confidence with each outing. He was currently watching Izuku hit baseballs in the nearby batting cages, which have recently become a favorite hangout for both. John Henry exclaimed, "That was a good one," while giggling at the noticeable dent in the chain-link fence caused by the baseball Izuku just whacked. "Not as good as the one you sent through the fence last week." Izuku grinned as he swung and struck another ball, this one striking the mesh net in front of the pitching machine. "That was a good day for me," he said. "I still can't believe it went 3 blocks." As their time in the cage came to an end, he sighed and Izuku left, packing his bat in his backpack. "All in the form, little brother," he said. "You gonna come to the arcade with me in Tokage tomorrow? We got a lot of excess tokens." Izuku slung his bag on his back and said, "Nah, gotta take my mom to a doctor's appointment, for example." Yorobi said, "Okay, man, let me know if you need anything," as they bumped chests and clasped hands with Izuku. Izuku started jogging down the street and called out, "See ya, Yorobi," instead. Later, Izuku muttered to himself, "If I hurry, I can swing by Dakoba Beach before it gets too dark," as he had been cleaning the beach by himself whenever he had the opportunity. Yorobi had come up with the idea to help the community and himself, and in the 10 months he had been cleaning things out, he had already made a significant impact. A few minutes later, Izuku pushed open the door to their apartment and walked in, looking around bewildered. "Mom, I'm home," he called. As he walked farther into the apartment and looked around, he called again, "Mom." A half-empty cup of cold tea sat on the counter, and the TV remained on. Izuku called out again, "Mom?" As he came around the counter, his bag falling from his grasp, and he saw his mother, lying on the kitchen floor, motionless. "Mom." As they slowly lowered the casket into the chilly ground, Izuku stood at the location of his mother's grave, staring down at it numbly. John Henry, Tokage, and Mitsuki Bakugo were standing next to him, their heads slightly bowed as they watched in respect. Izuku took a slow step forward, blotting his eyes and dropping the handful of dirt he had into the grave. Softly, he said, "Goodbye, Mom, get some rest. You've earned it and more." He sniffled and turned back around, barely moving, as Mitsuki gave him a hug. The older woman muttered, "I'm sorry, Izuku," as tears streamed down her face. "It's no one's fault," Izuku said, hesitantly giving the hug back as Tokage and John Henry moved forward. Akiko Tokage, a small-time hero's secretary, was a lithe man with long, dark green hair tied back and elven features. At the moment, he was embracing John Henry's arm while the big man embraced Izuku and Mitsuki. John Henry gave the two a comforting squeeze and said, "I'm here for you, little brother." "Yeah, anything you need, just ask," Tokage said, grinning softly, albeit a little too thinly. Izuku smiled glumly and said, "Thanks, guys, but I mostly want to go home now." As John Henry released him and took a step back, Mitsuki said, "I'll drive you," gazing up at the storm clouds that were gradually approaching. "I wanna walk," Izuku muttered as he retreated a few paces. "I need some time to think." Izuku left, and Mitsuki watched glumly. She questioned, "He can't catch a break, can he?" As he put his arm around Tokage without thinking, John Henry rumbled, "That's life for a quirkless." "It really is," Tokage sighed, glancing at Inko's grave marker before posing the question, "Where's his father?" Mitsuki laughed. "That asshole's probably off fucking some bimbo," she said. "They divorced when Izuku was diagnosed as quirkless. Asshole only cares to send the child support because Inko took him to court over it." "Asshole," concurred Tokage. She whispered, "You can say that again," as she watched Izuku turn the corner and vanish from view. "I'm worried about him." "So are we," exclaimed John Henry, "but we'll be there for him when he needs us." Izuku lived in a daze for the next few months, barely managing to muster the energy to get to work and back home. His heart was never in it, but he continued to visit the batting cages and hang out with John Henry. He hardly responded when Ua was allegedly attacked by villains, thinking only to call Mitsuki to inquire about Bakugo's condition before completely forgetting the incident. Izuku didn't begin to open up again until the third month, when John Henry made headlines. It took place 1 week following the sports festival. Izuku's phone rang as he was getting out of the shower after arriving home. Midoriya muttered, bewildered, "Tokage?" Since John Henry was in Hosu on business, he had just returned from their home and had dinner with the older man. He raised the phone to his ear and pressed the answer button. "Hey, Aki, did I forget something?" Izuku nearly dropped his phone as he hurried into the living room, clicked on the TV, and stared in horror as the news showed a burning Hosu. "Turn on the TV right now," the man yelled in a hysterical voice. Still no word on just who is behind this attack, but the devastation is far-reaching and the heroes have been stretched thin trying to contain the fighting. "John Henry's in Hosu," Tokage cried, "and he won't return my calls." Izuku comfortingly said, "He's fine, I know he's fine," but he had no idea who he was comforting. "He's probably way away from all the fighting." But, Izuku said softly, "Panicking isn't helping anyone, Aki. We just have to wait." Izuku returned to their home and waited with Tokage until 1 in the morning, when John Henry returned with a proud smile on his face despite having gauze wrapped around his arms and a portion of his neck. He exclaimed, "I caught the hero killer," as Izuku and Aki ran toward him, both pausing abruptly to gape at him. Weakly, Aki said, What?" He reaffirmed, "I caught the hero killer," moving forward to embrace his boyfriend before doing the same to Izuku. "He nearly got me, but nobody can defeat Yorobi Shirahama without his consent," he grinned proudly. Aki spluttered as John Henry ushered him to the couch, "But how? When?" He started by saying, "I was on my way back from the job site," as Izuku sat down excitedly across from them. "The truck broke down near an alleyway, so Akihiko and I—" "You remember Akihiko, don't you? From the position at Tatooine Station? I took a sledgehammer from the truck and went to investigate after we heard a struggle in the alleyway while we were working on it. Would you believe it? I did what any sane man with a hammer would do because it was the hero killer himself. He had native exactly where he wanted him, and a UA student was pinned. I struck him with it, and he flew. He was astonished, darling, and you should have witnessed it. As you can see, we got into a small altercation and gave the UA student enough time to get back up. And before Endeavor arrived, we had him unconscious." "That is incredible," Izuku exclaimed. "You defeated the hero killer, and prevailed. I understand, correct?" Aki gave John Henry a hug while he roared with laughter. "You fool." As he laughed with them, he spoke through tears, "You were meant to be heading to a construction site, not battling bad guys. I haven't felt this alive in years, but it wasn't planned. I stopped in a rank villain," he said, pacing to his feet. "Me, Mustafu's quirkless nobody apprehended the hero killer. Manuel made sure that the credit went to me, saying the hero commission is going to give me a lump sum of cash for taking down the bastard, and I'm going to take you on the vacation you deserve. He smiled at them as he squatted down in front of Aki and grabbed his hands. As he watched the two exult over the recently disclosed vacation, Izuku grinned. I hope you guys bring me back souvenirs, Izuku jokingly said, causing John Henry to turn to face him. No doubt, he smiled, but we're definitely going to the batting cages more often with this extra money. Oh, you should have seen Endeavor's face when I told him I was quirkless. He was so mad that I had shown up. He leapt back up. That image is probably going to stay with me for the rest of my life. He whooped and threw up his arms, saying, Suck it, number 2. Now WHO can't be a hero? You wanted to be a hero? Izuku said, his smile faltering. He interrupted John Henry's joyous dance with a soft question. Of course, I did, he said, grinning nostalgically, with the heroes being cool and me being the biggest person in my class. He sighed, I wanted to be a hero, so I trained and gained these muscles, but no hero school accepted my application, and when I met Endeavor during one of his takedowns, I asked him if I could be a hero without a power. It didn't matter that I was fat and quirkless. In essence, he told me to give up on my dreams and called me filth. With a downward gaze, Izuku said, even when you expect it, it still hurts. John Henry said, it really does, as he turned to face Aki, who jumped when the two gave him an expectant look. I always wanted to be a fashion designer and a trophy wife, Aki stated, fashion designer first, trophy wife after. The remark from his boyfriend made John Henry laugh uncontrollably. I love you, dork, he said, kissing his temple. Izuku smiled slightly as he watched his friends laugh and giggle joyfully, his chest feeling lighter than before. Aki glanced over and his grin vanished, giving way to worry. Izuku? Are you all right? You're in tears. What? Reaching up and wiping his eyes, Izuku asked, surprised to return with tears in his eyes. Oh, I am, he said, startled, then quietly laughed. I don't know why I'm crying. I haven't felt this happy in months. John Henry hugged the younger man and said, that's okay, then. Tears of joy. The months had flown by since that fateful night in Hosu, and now it was winter. John Henry had suddenly become a household name, and some heroes were willing to sponsor him if he wanted to sit for the exam for a provisional license. Tokage and John Henry had a disagreement that ended with Tokage reluctantly supporting John Henry's exam preparation. Izuku was genuinely delighted for his friend, but he couldn't help but feel jealous of his wealth. Nevertheless, he helped his friend, even with his diet and exercise. One day, as they lay on the sands of Takoba Beach, John Henry told him, I'll remember this, Izuku. You've been nothing but supportive, a true friend. Izuku had dismissed his compliments, happy to watch his friend obtain his temporary license and then start working for Death Arms. After All Might defeated All for One, he had been at Kamino Ward, assisting Kamui Woods in evacuating the wounded heroes and later assisting in the League of Villains' apprehension. Izuku didn't think things would ever be the same after that emotional weekend, which included John Henry lying in bed from stab wounds and Katsuki being rescued, not to mention the retirement of the symbol of peace. Izuku felt confident in stating that life had returned to normal, or as close to normal as he could manage, now that it was December and only a few weeks away from Christmas. Izuku had a stable job as a manager at a gas station, Tokage was contentedly working on designs at Best Jeanist's agency, and John Henry was scheduled to take his licensing exam at the beginning of the new year. He was content with his life, even though it wasn't the glamorous one he had always desired. Or as content as he could be, wearing his old school uniform because it was the only clean clothing he had, and trudging through the snow to an all-night laundromat. Setting aside the fact that Setsuna was able to house Sid doesn't mean I can't use the washer. Had to take that damn vacation when I needed a washer, Izuku sighed, picturing John Henry and Aki in Hawaii, enjoying the weather and each other. Oh no, Set. As he entered the laundromat, he glared at the lines of washers and dryers. Izuku's ex-girlfriend, Setsuna Tokage, was Aki's younger sister. They had dated for a few months following the sports festival, but they broke up around the midterms when Setsuna decided she didn't want a relationship while attending UA. Which Izuku understood and was okay with. So why was he unable to move on when she did? He shook his head as he started to load up the washers, complaining, no use in thinking about that, as he plopped down on a nearby chair and groaned as he dropped in the coins and turned the machine on. He was exhausted from going to the batting cages before coming here, and he didn't care that the wind and snow made batting challenging and even painful, it was worth it. Izuku jumped to his feet as the door slammed and exploded with equal ferocity, gasping when he noticed a young girl hiding in the corner next to the door, her eyes shielded. "Hey, child. How are you?" Izuku asked, his gaze flitting to the window as he watched three men dash by. One of them gave him a quick glance and then jerked his head up before continuing. "Kid, are you fleeing from them?" When she whimpered at his approach, he paused and asked, "Don't worry, they're gone now. Come on out." After peeking out from around her hands, the girl retreated behind them. With a sigh, Izuku knelt before her and said, "Look, kid, I'm not gonna hurt ya." He smiled as warmly as he could and said, "I wanna help ya, but you gotta meet me halfway." This time, she tentatively started to stand after peeking out once more. Izuku smiled as she accepted his hand and said, "It's okay, you're safe." When he saw a figure in the window, his eyes hardened. He quickly encircled the girl in his arms and leapt over a line of dryers, barely avoiding a huge, tank-like man as he ripped through the glass front. "How are you?" Izuku asked her quickly, risking a peek over his cover, and all he got in return was a groan. And was hit in the chin right away, causing him to crash into the wall next to his bag. The thug, whose face was covered by a plague doctor's mask, scoffed. Kid thought he was a hero, as he looked down at Eri, his stone fist transforming back into flesh. "You see that? You just killed someone else." The other sneered, like he was gonna be able to do anything against the Stone brothers, his skin as hard and granite-colored as the first. "Hey, asshole," when the tank heard the voice, he swallowed the insult that was on the tip of his tongue as a silver bat struck his face, sending him flying with a loud crash out of the laundromat and into the next building. "Dude." With his bat chambered at his side, the other thug stood tall, his face bloodied, his uniform torn, his chest heaving with every breath, and his skin turned to stone as he glared at Izuku. "He had a glass fucking jaw for a stone quirk," Izuku snorted, spitting blood onto the ground. "You feel the same way, Pebble?" "You're a bitch, son," he growled and charged the quirkless boy, who ducked the insane charge and struck the man's shoulder, causing him to collapse to the ground with a crater formed by the forceful blow. Izuku put his bat away, shook his head, and hurried to see how the little girl was doing. "That's new," he muttered, his eyes wide as he took in the carnage he had caused. "You all right?" As he gathered her in his arms and looked around the snowy streets, he asked as more people, some brandishing weapons, started to approach. She muttered, "Leave me, they're going to hurt you, but I'm fine." Izuku muttered dryly, "They're gonna try," and hurried down the street and out the side entrance. "Go get him." When he heard someone yell, he decided to run without further thought and sped down a side street, holding the young girl to his chest as he ducked between trash cans and down smaller alleyways. They came out onto a busier street, with a few people passing by as he ran to a small secondhand store and entered the front door as a number of thugs appeared from the alleyway. "Midoriya." As the bleeding teenager hurried to the back room, the teller asked in disbelief. Izuku muttered to himself, "I'm in trouble, Mick," as he opened the back door. "Don't tell them I came in here." He then shut the door and proceeded straight to a table full of clothing, saying, "We gotta be quick, one of them might have a tracking quirk." He put the girl down and tore off his jacket and the shirt underneath, using them as makeshift bandages to mop up the blood on his face. "We're going to change clothes and head to the nearest police station, maybe flag a hero down." "What's the reason behind this?" Quietly, the young girl inquired. "Because I told you I was gonna help," Izuku said, picking up a white-collared shirt and buttoning it up while looking through the other clothing. "Here." He gave her a pair of sweatpants, a sweater, a fluffy winter jacket, and finally a pair of snow boots. "Put these on." "However, why are you assisting me?" Izuku stopped and gazed down at the young child, whose red eyes were full of unshed tears. The little girl stared at him in wonder as she felt warmth blossom in her chest. "Because you need help," he said softly as he placed his hand on her head, mindful of her horn, and gently ruffled her white hair. Izuku grabbed a zip-up sweater and pulled it on before donning a leather trench coat and a ball cap over his green hair. "Now get dressed, we gotta get going," he said. The young girl said, "I'm ready," and allowed Izuku to come get her. "Here," he said, giving her a black beanie, "tuck your hair in." Before leaving with a casual gait, Izuku made sure there were no other people in the shop by carefully checking out the door. He muttered, "Sorry about that, Mick," while feigning to look through the store's inventory. The man said dismissively, "I don't think you're running from your usual tormentors, but more than enough quirkless have run through here in trouble before." Izuku sighed and avoided looking at the young girl. "I'm not," he said, "being chased by some thugs. I believe they're Yakuza." "How on earth did you end up with the Yakuza?" The man gave a low hiss. They were after the girl, Izuku retorted. Can you call the police? I believe one of them has a tracking quirk, but I'm not positive. Lines are all down thanks to the storm, but there's a police station down the street, can't be more than a few blocks. Thanks, Mick, I'll pay you back for the clothes. Izuku walked back out onto the street, keeping his head down and making sure the girl was out of sight. Don't worry about it, the old man said sternly. Izuku walked silently for a few moments before asking, What's your name? Before she responded, the weight of the air lingered in their ears for a moment more. She whispered, I'm Eri, as they trudged through the snow. Izuku smiled and said, Nice to meet you, Eri. Let's get you some help now. A couple of days later. Pro heroes are searching the area for the perpetrators of the horrifying attack, but there is still no word on who carried out the attack on a police precinct in downtown Shizuoka, which left 5 officers dead and 18 injured. A missing persons report has been filed for Izuku Midoriya, who is 15 years old, 5 feet 10 inches, 180 pounds, and has green hair and eyes. They were last seen at the downtown Shizuoka batting cages, where they were wearing a middle school uniform and carrying a metal baseball bat. If you know anything about this person, please let us know. With a little groan of protest from the students in attendance, the TV shut off. Why do you turn it off, Bakugo? Replied Kaminari. We wanted to see if there would be any more updates. Zero started to say, yeah, this is some serious shit, man, don't you want to know? But Bakugo interrupted him. He said in a low voice, any of the work-study extras working in Shizuoka? Zero and Kaminari looked at each other. Since Kamino Ward, Bakugo had changed. He had become quiet and reserved, substituting his insults, which they had grown to know and love, with succinct responses. I don't think any of them are, Zero explained. Juru is. Smiling, Kaminari said, she was working with Gang Orca on some case out there. Can you message her? Ask her to call me when she can? Bakugo snarled. Sure, but why? He inquired dazedly. That kid. The one that's missing, I know who he is. Bakugo murmured, I don't know where he is, but I have a hunch, and I doubt the police listen to hunches. To be honest, Kyoka Juru didn't have any issues with Bakugo. She couldn't deny the effort and commitment he put into his training, even though he was loud and one of the biggest assholes she knew. Because she saw no harm in trying to find a lead on a missing person, she had consented to stop by the thrift store he had told her about at 10 o'clock at night. Unfortunately, the storefront was completely destroyed. Glass and other debris were scattered on the floor, and the walls were covered in scorch marks. It's not the first time it happened, though. Mix built this place up who knows how many times. Life's not good for the quirkless, a man who was walking by whispered to her, pausing to glance at the store. Juru questioned, the store owner was quirkless? Yep. Ol Mix been around since the 2nd-gen heroes. Glad he made it out of this, but... Do you know if one of his regulars was a boy named Izuku Midoriya? Fluffy hair? Freckles? The man asked after a moment of bewilderment. Juru displayed the photo that she had received from Bakugo. She was fairly certain that Midoriya had changed in appearance by the time she was 2 years old, but the man nodded slowly. Inko's boy. Haven't seen him in a few weeks, but if you want to find him you should go to the old construction zone. Place was shut down years ago because of unsafe work practices and never started up again. Kids go there sometimes to hang out, smoke cigarettes, that kind of thing. Kyoka said, thank you, sir, and he was fully aware of the location. She was raised in Shizuoka, after all. She noticed something suspicious halfway there. Excuse me, sir, Juru called, causing the man to quicken his pace. Hey, stop, I'm a hero. Juru said to a man wearing a slightly tattered leather trench coat who was moving as quickly as he could toward the construction site, appearing to be holding something beneath the strained leather. Juru immediately started running after the man as he took off running. The man dashed into the construction area, and she ducked through a hole in the fence. As they dashed through unfinished apartments and hallways, Juru was right behind him, trying her hardest to stay up. The only thing that prevented Kyoka from being rendered unconscious by a supersonic rock was slipping on some gravel. Crack. Another rock smashed through the wall behind her, leaving a grapefruit-sized hole where the tiny pebble had struck, and she rolled to some cover. Kyoka looked up as the man growled, you fucking like that, punk? Next one's going through your fucking eyes. She decided to take a chance since his voice sounded youthful, perhaps her age. Izuku Midoriya. She exclaimed. The question, who wants to know, was asked after a pause. Hero in training. Can we talk? She called back, earphone jack. Silence for a few more seconds. Step on out, hands where I can see them. As she stepped out, Kyoka discreetly hid her jacks behind her neck, extending the appendages to her boots. However, she immediately jumped back when another pebble left a crater where her foot had been about to step. He pointed the bat at her and demanded, "You think I was born yesterday? Let's see those jacks too." Kyoka let out a growl and emerged with his hands and jacks visible. She glanced quickly across the teenager's face. The joyful emerald eyes he had in the photo were now cold and hard, watching her every move as he held a bat protectively in front of him. It was scratched and covered in dry blood. With his chin out, Izuku questioned, "What's a first year doing out this far?" "I was coming back from my work study when I got a call from our mutual friend, the angry Pomeranian." Izuku laughed incredulously. "Right, Bakugo sent you, and I'm a fairy princess." Kyoka sassed, displaying the old photo on her phone. "Should put your tiara on then, sister. He said you hung out around old Mix when you were in trouble, so I figured I could check it out," she said. Izuku placed the bat under his arm and sighed, the strain in his arms gradually releasing. He turned and started to walk, muttering, "Sorry, but heroes have offered to help us before." When a young girl ran out of the corner and into Izuku's arms, Kyoka's eyes widened as she followed him into another room. "We?" she asked. They could almost pass for a father and his daughter, and Juru could believe it based on the way he checked on her, asked quietly if she was hurt, and examined the little child's clothing for any tears or scrapes while trying to speak in a light and trouble-free manner. Izuku gently said, "All right, Angel?" to the child with the red eyes. The young girl said, beaming as Izuku gave her a gentle nose bop before picking her up and turning to face Kyoka. He turned and started to walk, saying, "We've been in one place too long, we gotta go." "Hold on," Kyoka yelled, "we aren't going anywhere before you tell me what's going on." While continuing to walk down the hall, Izuku argued, "We don't have time," adding, "They'll be on us soon." "Who's they?" Izuku finally yelled, "Walk and talk, hero," which caused Kyoka to startle a little. "I've been avoiding these Yakuza jerks for the past week, and since you can't read the fucking room, I'm not going to get caught now." Izuku grunted and stopped walking when the young girl abruptly flicked his forehead. "Zuku, be nice," she said sweetly, "no cussing." Izuku looked back at Kyoka and said, "I'll try. We have maybe 5 minutes before the Yakuza know where we are, so we have to leave now or we'll be screwed, it's up to you." Kyoka gave him a fierce look before hurriedly approaching him. His stride continued as she approached him. "Why are Yakuza after you?" she asked, taking out her phone. He glanced around the corner and said, "They're after Eri, tried to kill me when she ran into the laundromat I was in, before leaving the building again as the snow started to fall. Destroyed an entire police precinct when we tried to get help. Heroes aren't to be trusted, half we've met so far are on their payroll. And one of them has a tracking quirk, not sure about the range, but they've been a few steps behind us since we started running." As she displayed Gang Orca's phone number, she said empathetically, "That must have been difficult. Let me call my boss, he might be able to help." Izuku questioned cautiously, "Sure he can be trusted?" as Eri's arms grew tighter around his neck. She said firmly, "With my life," and then she called. A rough, drowsy voice said, "Hello? Juru, this better be worth it." Does Yakuza hunting a teenager and a child sound worth it? Orca, sounding much more alert, commanded, "Speak." "Izuku Midoriya, the missing person out of Shizuoka. I found him thanks to a tip from my classmate, Bakugo. He's been protecting a little girl the Yakuza are after, we're not sure why, but he's been on the run this entire week." "Understood. I'll contact a few heroes I can trust. Can you reach the agency?" "No, it's too far, and the last precinct they were in got attacked." "This is dire indeed. Try and reach Ua, that may be our best bet." Izuku yelled, "Get down," and swung at Juru as the building next to them exploded. "Are you alright?" Izuku said, having already stood up. His bat flew back into Eri's hands, and he clung to his back. Juru stood up and glared at her now destroyed phone. "Fine," she said, "damn it, we needed that." Ixola yelled, "Bill me later. Move." And both teenagers leapt back to avoid a glowing rock that exploded when it struck the pavement. As the other thugs ran into the street, the slender Yakuza shouted, "Finally found you, Metal Bat," and started to pick up rocks. The rocks he picked up started to glow a dull orange. "Overhaul wants your head," he exclaimed. Izuku sneered, "It ain't for sale, shitstain," as Jiru moved forward with her jacks plugged into the amplifiers. Heartbeat distortion. The majority of the thugs were sent to the ground when a punch to the ground caused a strong sound wave that broke the pavement and the ground beneath. My turn. Izuku growled as he lunged forward, sending two struggling goons hurtling through the air with his bat. The skinny goon covered his friends with an overhand swing that caused another to sink deeper into the already cracked ground. Izuku then leapt back, avoiding multiple explosive rocks. Izuku yelled, "Run!" to Jiru, and the two of them started running down the street. Izuku's swing sent two cars hurtling down the street in the direction of the thugs. "That'll hold them up," Izuku uttered in between breathless exclamations. As they ran, he held Eri in his arms once more. As they turned a corner without pausing, Jiru remarked, "Gang Orca should send some trustworthy heroes to our area because he knows we're in Shizuoka." Izuku moaned, "Shizuoka's big, gonna be a while, till they find us," and narrowed her eyes at a nearby truck. "Carry Eri," Izuku said, giving the little girl to the hero. She panicked for a moment, but Kyoka shushed her and ran a reassuring hand over her back. As Izuku popped the lock, Kyoka took cover behind the truck and reassured her gently, "It's okay, kid, I'll protect you." She insisted, "Are you stealing a car?" Eri interrupted, appropriating without asking, causing Jiru to shift his attention from the young girl to the curly-haired teenager who was attempting to hotwire the car at the moment. As the truck roared to life, Izuku muttered, "Get in. Haven't had the cover to do this without getting found almost immediately." As bony spikes jabbed into the truck and the street, Kyoka slid over the car's hood and jumped into the passenger seat. "Punch it." He fishtail-ed as he swerved on the icy roads to avoid the Yakuza's ranged attacks, and the truck took off down the road with a loud engine. Reverend Izuku, trying to stay on the street, muttered, "That was close. Look around for a phone. Perhaps you can get back in touch." Jiru started scanning the cab, keeping an eye on Eri as she opened the center console and glove box. As she opened the old phone, Jiru exclaimed, "Got a flip phone. Shit, it's dead." Izuku quickly glanced at the dashboard. "Charger," he said, gesturing to the cord that was plugged in. Jiru plugged the phone in quickly and tapped her leg nervously while it started to boot up. "Orca knows where we are, but we need some backup now, so when this thing turns on I'm gonna message a friend who should be in town." Izuku said, "Sounds good to me," without giving Eri a sidelong glance. "How you doin', princess?" he asked in a light voice. "I'm hungry," she said with a sniff. "We'll get food as soon as we're safe, okay?" Jiru said, "Here," and took a candy bar out of her jacket pocket before giving it to the young girl. "Gotta keep your strength up, kid." Eri exclaimed, "Thank you," before joyfully cracking open the candy bar and nibbling on it. Izuku turned on a deserted road, eyes scanning the dark corners and side streets, and asked, "What's the plan after we call your friend? Whatever tracking quirk these Yakuza have has a pretty good range. It'll take them some time, but they'll catch up." Jiru inquired, "How long do we have?" "With the truck? Closer to an hour, maybe," Izuku replied with a smirk, "with the length of time it takes to find us, as well as the fact that we don't have them continuously on our ass. I think our tracker can only use it sparingly, but that doesn't mean these assholes won't grab their own cars once they realize we're in this truck." When the phone eventually turned on, Jiru said, "Don't worry, we should be able to reach Ua with your strength quirk and Tokiyami's dark shadow." "I'm quirkless." Jiru paused, staring at the boy incredulously at the simple statement. "You're kidding me." He took another sharp right, then immediately a left, saying, "Nope, quirkless all my life." Jiru blinked. As her jacks picked up his steady heartbeat, she realized he was telling the truth. "You sent two guys into space, and buried another with a swing of your bat," Jiru said. "Look, just get in touch with Bird Boy," Izuku said, avoiding eye contact as Eri glanced between them. "It's not my fault they're lightweights." Mostly to irritate him, she asked, "How'd you know he was a bird?" Izuku said, "Sports festival, now call." Jiru complained, but hurriedly entered Tokiyami's phone number. "You better answer, you po rip-off. Who calls to disturb the darkness?" Jiru looked at Eri with a chuckle when the young girl muttered, "No swearing." "Tokiyami, you edgy bastard, you have no idea how good it is to hear your voice," Jiru exclaimed in relief. "Jiru? Whose phone are you using to call me?" "Doesn't matter, look, Tokiyami. I'm in some shit, need help on a VIP escort to UA from Shizuoka. I am currently at my parents' dwelling. I'm assuming you are being chased?" Izuku complained, one way to say it, which caused Jiru to glare at him and shush him. "Your VIP?" Jiru said, "One of them, you in?" Meet me at Takoba Municipal Beach, we can head for Ua from there. Juru asked Izuku, do you know Takoba Municipal Beach? I should, he remarked nonchalantly. Now that some distance had been gained, they turned calmly onto the next street. I'm the one that cleaned the dump. That was you? Juru inquired, startled and clearly impressed. Hey, yeah, Izuku said with a nostalgic smile. I cleaned up 3/4 of it on my own over the course of a year and a half, with assistance from my friend John Henry for the final quarter. And, you know John Henry, of course. When Tokiyami asked, will you need any other assistance besides combat? Eyes darting to 2 trucks approaching from behind, Izuku said, yeah, food, adding that they had been on the run for a week with nothing but trash. Eri said, and that's icky, which caused Izuku to laugh. Did I just hear a child? Just get there, bird brain. Juru yelled. Take care, most heroes in the area aren't to be trusted. Izuku whispered, you might want to end the call there, Rockstar, as the trucks approached, carrying a number of Yakuza thugs in their bed. Izuku made a sharp left turn onto a broad avenue, barely avoiding multiple bone spikes as the trucks pursued, and Juru yelled, you said we had an hour, and hung up. I said an hour if they didn't grab trucks, he growled, make one more call. Number? With their pursuers close behind, he yelled, 783-552-7674, and made a sharp right, scraping the sides of the truck as they turned into a narrow alley. After a few rings, a weary woman's voice finally drew lead, this is Tokage, if you're a telemarketer I'm hanging up. Izuku yelled, set, as the truck behind him collided with him. Juru tried her best to reassure the child as Eri cried in fear. Where have you been, Izuku? Aki has been worried about you, you jerk. When I'm not going to get fucked in my ass, I'll say sorry to Aki. Izuku yelled, swerving sharply onto the next street, for crying out loud, I have Yakuza pursuing me. Don't swear. Izuku gasped and reached back to extend his pinky, which Eri swiftly hooked with hers as she cried out. Sorry, Izuku said softly to her, I didn't mean to. Set. We need your assistance, so please head to Takoba Beach if you're still in town. All right, Setsuna said quietly, please, Izu, stay safe. We have to stall these guys or we won't make it to Takoba alive. Izuku growled and hung up, taking off his seatbelt. Take the wheel, Rockstar. What are you doing in the hell? Juru yelped, grabbing the wheel as Izuku kicked the door off the driver's side, letting go of Eri's pinky to hang out the door. Juru moved fully to the driver's seat, eyes wide. I don't know how to drive. You'll be all right. It operates automatically. Izuku shouted over the icy blast of the wind, his trenchcoat whipping around him like a cape as he glared at the 2 trucks chasing them, his bat deflecting several long-ranged quirks. When I jump, you keep going. Keep Eri safe because if I get to Takoba, she won't be safe. Are you absolutely insane? Back there are 2 trucks full of Yakuza? Juru screamed. Izuku smiled lopsidedly at Eri and said, which means our tracker is there. I'll be back, princess. Protect the hero. Hey, Kay. Eri chirped, as if Izuku's carelessness didn't bother him. Alan's why? Exclaimed David Tennant in the Doctor Who series. Izuku whooped, jumping out of the truck and landing on the street in a run as he chambered his bat at his side. Smile, assholes. With a growl, he struck the truck's front end with his bat, crumpling it like a tin can and sending it crashing into the other truck, which was then hurtling into a group of trees. He's completely insane. Juru moaned as she made every effort to keep the truck moving. Eri exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with faith in her guardian, Papa will be fine. He never breaks a promise. I hope so, kid. Juru sighed, worriedly glancing over his shoulder. Izuku walked with a bat on his shoulder in the direction of the trucks. One of the Yakuza who had been in the truck's bed ground out, you bastard, as he stood up, bone plates protruding from his arms. I'll kill. The back end of the truck crumpled even more as Izuku's bat crashed into his face, cutting off what he was about to say. Izuku scoffed and walked over to the other truck, where the passenger was screaming into a phone while attempting to stop the blood from streaming down his face. Sure you will, he said. The thug stopped talking as the door was torn off its hinges and he was flung from the truck, headed west out of the city. We need another, he said. His breath left his lungs as he crashed into a nearby building. Tracker. What was that? Tracker, come in. Izuku picked up the phone after glancing down at it. Izuku brought the phone to his ear and said, thanks for telling me who he was, observing the tracker slowly sink to the ground. I take him out, you won't be able to track us, right? Izuku said coldly. The voice on the other end said, am I to assume this is Metal Bat? Izuku sneered, that's a good name, and stomped his foot on a Yakuza that was attempting to crawl toward a gun on the road. Mind if I run with it? He asked. I'll cut to the chase. Give us Eri and we may just let you and the Ua brat live. Izuku kicked the downed Yakuza in the face to knock him unconscious and said, yeah. See, that deal don't sit right with me, before walking over to Tracker. See, you assholes burned down Mick's store, you killed some good cops the other night, and what's worse, you've terrified and scared a little girl who I'm quickly starting to see as family. So, let me tell you this, bitch, if you keep coming after me, if you keep sending your little thugs after me and mine, then my bat will taste blood and I'll smash your little organization back to the Edo period. I will dismantle and tear down everything you've ever built, and I'll walk away laughing. Tracker glanced up slowly. He wheezed, Overhaul, before Izuku's knee struck his head, shattering the wall the injured man had been leaning against and knocking him out cold. Overhaul, huh? I've heard of that name, Izuku grumbled, seeing what you've sent, I'm not impressed. Overhaul snarled, be careful what you say next, boy, it could get you killed. Izuku threw the phone into the air and struck it with his bat, breaking it into 100 tiny fragments. Hasn't so far, he said sarcastically, do your best, bitch boy. He turned to face the wreck. The thugs were all either unconscious or so badly hurt that they were only able to moan in agony. He sneered, pathetic, and turned to leave. He'll kill you. Izuku paused at the words, turning to face a familiar bomb creator who was slowly getting to his feet. His face and clothing were covered in blood, and his left leg was horribly twisted. With 2 glowing white rocks in each hand, he kept glaring at the teenager. Overhaul and his 8 precepts will slaughter you, Bomber yelled, you're a dead man walking. Izuku remarked, not convinced, while Bomber flung the rocks. Izuku swung his bat around in a lightning-fast motion and avoided one. After all, Pink, I still have my bat. Bomber screamed as the rock exploded and flew through the truck, leaving behind smoke and flames from the wreckage. The rock shot back towards Bomber. With his bat chambered under his arm and the firelight flashing in his eyes, Izuku turned to leave. After 20 minutes. Juru glanced down at the young girl curled in her arms, sleeping soundly for the brief time they had left before having to run once more. She had been cautious, of course, but she was taken aback by how readily the girl had trusted her after Izuku had gone to stall. When the girl gave her instructions, she obeyed without question. Juru had encouraged her to get some sleep so she would be well rested when Izuku returned, and she hadn't even protested. When the young girl practically dragged Juru into the back of the truck and curled up against the older teen's chest, it had come as a surprise. Eri had said, Papa says it's too cold to sleep alone, before resting her head on the girl's chest and shutting her eyes. This way we can both be warm. In order to stand guard, Juru couldn't bring herself to say no to the girl because of her sweet innocence. Instead, she covered the two of them with her coat and held the girl in her arms. To improve her ability to hear anyone approaching, she had her jacks stabbed into the truck. Why would anyone wish to harm a child with such sweetness? She asked herself absently as she ran a hair through the child's soft white hair and grinned warmly when the sleeping child muttered something unintelligible before settling further into Jerusa's arm crook. She was startled out of her sleepy reverie by a pair of footsteps. She relaxed at the familiar silhouette with the metal bat, her eyes sharpening as she looked out the back window. Izuku, who was looking in through the driver's side and grinning at Eri's slumber, whispered, "You two all right? She got you, too, huh?" Juru whispered, "What do you mean?" as he placed his bat in the passenger seat and started searching the center console for a lighter. He took out a pack of cigarettes, slipped one between his lips, and lit it without saying a word. "First night we had to crash outside," Izuku said, leaning back against the truck's frame and exhaling a stream of smoke. "We huddled together for warmth. I stayed awake just in case. And hey, well, I spent some time looking at that pure little beacon of innocence, and I couldn't think of one reason anyone would think to hurt such a sweet kid. I haven't had a doubt about protecting her since." "My thoughts exactly," Juru said, glancing down at the young girl. "What happened with the Yakuza?" he then inquired. "Well, I destroyed the two trucks. Tracker's knocked out, too, so we may be in the clear for a while, but we shouldn't get complacent. As soon as Set and Tokiyami get here, we'll need to leave. Is the truck still good to go?" Juru gave a headshake. "It's totaled. She breathed deeply. Some of those bone spikes hit the engine. No way we can repair it. That's fine, Izuku responded dismissively. I didn't think it'd last. We can take the train. With backup we should be able to make it to Ua no problem, unless you want to grab another truck. Juru complained. Let's keep our Grand Theft Auto down to one vehicle, please, which made Izuku laugh. We didn't steal anything, it's appropriating without asking, he laughed. That's another thing. Why are you teaching this innocent angel that stealing is okay? He extinguished the cigarette and got into the truck, hiding the missing door with his coat. Bite me, Rockstar. We've been on the run for the better part of a week, he said. Concessions had to be made. If it's only been a week, why does she call you Papa? Juru inquired. Izuku's eyes sharpened for a moment as he stared at the frozen beach. I don't care if she ain't my blood, I'll protect her just as fiercely. Hell if I know. Izuku sighed. Started calling me that on the third day, after trying to get her to stop for 4 hours. I figured I'd just roll with it. Oh my god, you're such a dad. Juru laughed softly, and Izuku winced. Yeah. Laugh it up, Rockstar. He grumbled. Anything else we need to discuss before our reinforcements get here? How are you so strong? She inquired with care. Earlier, you said you didn't have a quirk. But quirkless can't just bat trucks around like tinfoil, or send full-grown men flying. Izuku pondered his answer while tapping his fingers absently against the steering wheel. I honestly don't know, he muttered. Eri ran into the laundromat terrified. And I had calmed her down, promised I'd protect her, then the Stone brothers came smashing into the place. Sent me flying with one punch. He banged on the bat, but I'd landed by my bat, and the only thing I could think of while lying in that rubble was how I was gonna break my promise to that little girl. So, I picked up my bat, and I sent one of those fuckers through the building across from us. The other I left in a crater in the middle of the room. He glanced back at her and sighed. Since then, I've had this strength. Don't know where it came from or how I got it, but it's a welcome power-up. So why the bat? Juru said aloud. If you're strong enough to send them flying, then why bother with the bat? Izuku laughed. He tapped the slab of scorched and dented aluminum and asked, that's easy, adding, my fists have failed me before, but this bat? Me and this bat have been through it. It hasn't failed me since I sent a baseball through the fence at the downtown batting cages, and I doubt it's gonna fail me anytime soon. Juru shook her head amusedly after blinking. You're one weird guy, Midoriya, but I dig it. Glad I got your seal of approval, Rockstar. Juru gave a snort. Watch yourself, Metalbat. I can take it away whenever I want. The two teenagers chuckled softly, relishing the momentary quiet before it was finally broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Midoriya, declared Juru. With a command, protect Eri, he grabbed his bat and exited the truck, throwing his coat back on and letting it unfurl. Izuku commanded, stop, as he strode, bat in hand, towards the approaching figures. You got 5 seconds to tell me who the fuck you are, or else. Zuzu. Oof. As Setsuna Tokage practically tackled the taller teen, squeezing the life out of him before he pushed her off with a growl, Juru felt a twinge of jealousy. He complained, now is not the time, Set, get off me. With fists on her hips, she yelled, not the time? I thought you were dead for the last week, dead Midoriya, heatedly. He sneered, like it's my fault, as he turned to face Tokiyami. When he looked directly at Izuku, the bird-headed hero, holding a backpack, nodded respectfully. Izuku nodded back before turning back to Setsuna. Look, we can air out all that shit later, right now we need to get Eri to UA. She looked at the truck and said, is that the little girl I heard calling you, Papa, over the phone? Yeah. Yakuza want her bad, he said, motioning for Juru to exit the vehicle. After giving Eri a gentle shake to wake up, Juru said, Eri, we gotta go. The young child murmured, looking around in a slight panic and instantly raising her head. Juru comfortingly reassured her, your papa is here with some friends to keep you safe, so don't worry. With bright eyes, she said, Papa? She yelled, I told you he keeps his promise, before flinging the door open and bolting outside. Papa, she cried, stopping abruptly upon seeing Set and Tokiyami. Izuku gently said, it's okay, Eri, and extended his hand to her. As Juru got out of the truck and fixed her coat, she hurried to his side and took his hand, hiding behind his leg. What's Juru doing here? Setsuna inquired, a little irritated by the rocker's presence with Izuku. Bakugo sent me, Juru retorted, giving the glare a similar one. You got a problem with me or something, Tokage? She said, no, not at all, quickly. I know you two need nourishment before we start planning, Tokiyami said, reaching into his bag and taking out some snacks from the gas station. That we do, Eri. Why don't you go grab some food? Izuku said gratefully. But. The beak, she whimpered, fearfully glancing at Tokiyami. Izuku moaned. Aw shit. Forgot about that. Tokiyami said, if the young one does not like my face, I can back off. No, it's not that, we've been chased by the Shihesaikai for the last week, all they wear is plague masks. With a nod of comprehension, Tokiyami knelt down and reached into the bag. Do not worry young one, he said, searching through the snacks for something. He took out a bright red apple and held it out to Eri, who widened her eyes and began to drool at the corners of her mouth before wiping it away. I am to be a hero, not Yakuza, and as proof of my dedication to the light, he said. She slowly extended her hand and took the apple from Tokiyami. She muttered, thank you, as she bit into the apple after gazing at it with awe. Well, would y'all look at that, Izuku said with a laugh and a loving fiddle with Eri's hair, you made a friend, kid. She jokingly hummed. Tokiyami gave the bag to Izuku so he could eat too, then turned to Juru. My heart lightens with your friendship, young Eri. I will command the darkness to protect you to the end, he said solemnly. There's earpieces in the bag as well. Also I took the liberty of contacting Hawks and Gang Orca, he continued. I've updated them on the situation and our plan. They'll be moving in 15 minutes to hit known Yakuza strongholds in the city to give us a distraction. He laughed. We also have Red Riot, Uravity, and Froppy on their way to back us up. That Yakuza won't realize what hit them, Juru smiled. Around a mouthful of honey bun, Izuku questioned, who's Red Riot? Any relation to Crimson Riot? Only in name and kind of in quirk, Juru replied. His real name is Eijiro Kirishima. Quirk. Hardening. He's the most combat-oriented trainee we have in 1A besides Bakugo. He's a Tetsu rip-off, Setsuna boastfully declared. Izuku made Set glare at him when he asked, or is Tetsu a rip-off of him? Either way, it'll be good to have them. They gonna be here soon? Tokiyami gave a headshake. They will meet us en route at the next bus stop. They were almost to Ua when I made the call. All right, Izuku sighed, taking out a juice pouch and popping the top to drink it as he distributed the communicators. This is how we're going to do it. Set, Juru, you'll both be inside the train while we travel. You're the last line of defense for Eri. Me and Tokiyami will ride on the roof to ward off any attackers that are trying to board. With Orca and Hawks hitting the Yakuza tonight, we may have a chance to slip by quietly. Setsuna pushed her ex back and said, sorry Izuku, but you're not the provisional heroes here, which caused him to glare at her angrily. Your plan's good but you're a civilian, and quirkless at that, you shouldn't. Juru cut him off abruptly, saying, he can hold his own, after all, the guy just took out 2 trucks of Yakuza on his own. What? Set asked naively, causing Tokiyami to just stare at the boy in shock while Izuku snickered. How? Izuku said, I have a bat, and shrugged. I'm gonna need better than that if. When Juru yelled, dear God, would you just shut up and listen to him? The other 3 turned to stare at her in shock. Just because you're a recommendation student doesn't mean you're in charge. In fact, Midoriya's been out here for a week on his own, sticking it to the Yakuza and not getting caught, so I say we listen to him. Agreed, Tokiyami said solemnly, crossing his arms. We need every fighter we can get, and his spoken feats are impressive, quirkless or not. Under her breath, Setsuna complained about something. Fine, whatever, but if he dies I'm taking it out of your ass, Juru. Noted, she said acerbically before turning to smirk tauntingly at Izuku. I hope you'll be able to keep up with us, Metal Bat. Hey, don't worry about it. Izuku grinned and said, after all, I got a new reputation among these Yakuza bastards. Can't disappoint them now. Overhaul surveyed the ruins where his tracking crew had been. The others refused to continue the chase because they were physically more afraid of Metal Bat than they were of Overhaul, and 5 were killed in what appeared to be an explosion. Since he was the only tracker he truly needed, it was okay that only one of them was willing to go on. Chrono, said Overhaul, causing his lieutenant to approach. He said, yes, Overhaul. He turned and started to walk back towards his car, saying, I want Metal Bat found. Send in the 8 precepts. Tell them I need him back alive. The little punk will regret the day he opposed the Shihesaikai. My lord Overhaul, Nemoto yelled, running over, our hideouts in Shizuoka are getting hit by the heroes. It's Gang Orca and Hawks with their own backup from out of town. He snarled, damn it, the little brats must have finally made contact, his annoyance already boiling over. I want them found. Now. Reports of fighting in downtown Shizuoka has heroes scrambling to contain the violence. Unknown assailants wearing bird masks have been reported en masse since the attack on the downtown precinct. Eyewitnesses report an unknown hero carrying a metal baseball bat fighting the gang in the streets. Fighting Yakuza with a metal bat of all things. Seen in this video destroying 2 trucks. Have you heard of this guy? Going up against Yakuza with nothing but a metal bat and brass ones the size of All Might's fists. He's dressed like a delinquent, he carries a metal bat as a weapon, yet he's fighting the Yakuza, and if reports are to be believed, then he's also protecting a little girl. This just in. Heroes from outside of Shizuoka are descending upon our town, with names like Gang Orca, Hawks and even Moroku heading the charge. Inside sources say they're helping this metal bat vigilante, but nothing as of yet has been confirmed. I got footage of one of his fights and it is wicked. He sends people flying with a single swing. He took out 2 trucks on his own. I'm tellin' ya, the guy looks familiar. I swear we did construction with him, but that guy was quirkless. Metal bats sticking it to these Yakuza assholes, he's a hero. We as citizens shouldn't be applauding Metal Bat as a vigilante. His actions could get people killed. Self-defense, it can't be ruled any other way when you're targeted like Metal Bat has been. But one question still remains. The question that needs to be answered. The single question we need to ask ourselves. Who is the Metal Bat? When they arrived at the train station, there were no people there. Tokiyami stated, train should be along in 15, while keeping a close eye out for any potential hidden traps. Be ready, Izuku said, holding a bat in his hand as Eri lay on his back and curiously looking over his shoulder. Things have been too quiet. With her jack stabbed into the ground, Juru said, I don't hear anyone coming. But, the incoming train is making it difficult to hear anything, even from this far away, so be ready. Setsuna sighed and looked around boredly. I still think you two are being paranoid, she said. Eri leapt off Izuku's back as he knelt down and rolled his eyes. He looked the young girl in the eyes and said gravely, you'll stay with Juru when the train arrives, okay? Do everything she says? She nodded gravely and giggled when he tousled her hair. Okay, Papa. Good girl, he said, straightening his posture as the train rounded the bend. Izuku trailed off as he was struck by a wave of vertigo, barely keeping his feet under himself as he fell against a nearby pillar to steady himself. All right, we know the game plan, let's, he said. What? The fuck, he grunted, turning to face his friends, who were similarly impacted. Eri was already on the ground, groaning and with swirly eyes. This was far too easy. Izuku snarled when he noticed the hazy figure coming toward them, another giggling as he drained an alcoholic beverage. The lead man sighed in disappointment. I had expected more when the young head said you were dangerous. The metal bat of Mustafu is just a whiny, teenage brat. How disappointing. When Kyoka threw herself over the young girl, the swaying blur paused and said, come on kid, we got a job to do. He laughed as he stepped over Midoriya and headed towards the downed Eri. Hee, his tolerance is for shit. Juru muttered, why you won't take her, and gave him a slack glare as Dark Shadow emerged, similarly impacted, and attempted to swipe at the inebriated man. The other said, drawing a revolver, you three need not, just hand the child over and we will leave, along with Metal Bat, of course. Crack. Everyone stared in disbelief at Izuku, who had slammed his bat into his forehead and had blood slowly running down his face. Before he vanished as a dot on the horizon, Sakari started to say, what the last thing he would remember is the face of a metal bat before his world burst into agony. Izuku sneered, unwinding from his swing, and turned to Nemoto, who was now trembling at the sight of 3 heroes in training glaring at him while being led by a crazy psycho with a bat. Well, that really clears the senses, Izuku said. When Midoriya lunged forward and buried a fist in his stomach, Nemoto let out a wheezing breath and demanded, what is your quirk? His quirk rippled through the air. The growling response was, I don't have one, and Nemoto bounded back, slamming through the train station wall. Trains not stopping, Tokiyami yelled as he watched the approaching train quickly accelerate in an attempt to get past the altercation at the station. Kyoka yelled, gonna have to jump, while cradling Eri. Tsukuyomi, can you help me and Eri on? He nodded, of course, Lizardy, will you need assistance? She turned to Izuku and was about to question him about his strength when her eyes widened. Thanks, Po, but I got it. It was, Izuku, duck, she cried. Izuku's bat was torn from his hands as he knelt at the waist and barely avoided a fist covered in gems. Oh, he swore as he ducked from his assailant. As Tokage and Tokiyami charged forward, Setsuna threw her fists at a yellow-haired man wearing a plague mask, and Tokiyami prevented a man chomping down on Izuku with a bag on his head and a noose tied around his neck. Plugging her jacks into her wrist amps, Kyoka yelled, "Damn it, we're gonna miss the train." She was prepared to fight if the three Yakuza managed to get past the others. Izuku commanded, obstructing the scarecrow and the man covered in gems, "No, you three go. Go, I'll catch up." Then Setsuna started, "But we can't, we have no choice," Tokiyami stated firmly, and Dark Shadow encircled Kyoka and Eri with a wing before throwing the three of them onto the swift train. Lizardy. With her parts flying in the direction of the train, Setsuna yelled, "Damn it, you better survive or I'll kill you, Midoriya." Izuku sighed and clenched his fist, glaring down at the three villains. "Now," he said, "give me my fucking bat back." WVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWV open and descended into the first car while the other passengers gaped at them. Juru yelled, "Hit students, don't worry," and tried to reassure Eri by putting her arms around her more tightly. As she composed herself, Setsuna remarked, "This is crazy, how did they find us?" Juru glared at the girl. "Midoriya told you they had a tracker," adding, "He knocked him out to buy us time, probably came to and tracked us down." Peering through the window was Dark Shadow. "We have company. More Yakuza thugs." Setsuna swore, "Shit. Stay in here with the kid. I'll help Tsukuyomi." She left Juru little choice but to vanish out the window. When Setsuna departed, Juru let out a frustrated sigh. The worried girl's ears perked up as she heard the faint sound of metal scraping against leather. "We're all right, Eri," Juru reassured her. "Your papa's gonna meet us at UA and all these villains will be rotting in jail." She kept saying, "It'll all be fine," as she prepared her wrist amplifier. "Miss, watch out." Juru was prepared, but the warning arrived too late. Her would-be attacker was thrown into the compartment door by a single shockwave punch, and one of the other riders swiftly used elastic arms to restrain him. Juru called out, "Everyone all right?" and got shaky nods in response. "Good," she sighed, turning to face Eri, who was gazing up at her with wonder. "Don't worry, half pint, I got you," she said. The plastic quirk user tried not to shake his voice when he asked, "Who are these guys?" With her phone up and recording everything, a teenage passenger exclaimed, "These are Yakuza. They must be pissed if they're being this flashy." "Everyone get to the back of the train," the operator yelled. "If this is hero business then we need to make sure the civilians are safe." Juru commanded, "You're right. Everyone to the back now." And most people rushed to the back cars, leaving only the operator and the recording team. Juru told the operator, "We can't ask you to risk your life, sir. You can leave as well." "This is my job, miss," the elderly gentleman replied quietly. "I'll keep this train going. You just make sure those Yakuza don't derail anything, then we'll really be in trouble." She turned to give the teenager who was still recording a sharp glare and said, "Thank you, sir," before bowing to him and saying, "You need to leave." "No way," she sneered, focusing first on her face and then on the hole in the roof. "I've been waiting for a big break and this is it. With this footage I'll be a shoo-in for that internship at Juzo News," she said. Juru said, "You're willing to risk your life for a news story?" As her eyes briefly scanned her, she exclaimed, "Yep, earphone jack, right? I loved your debut with Death Arms." Juru looked at Eri, who was equally perplexed, and blinked. She said slowly, "I didn't get any media coverage for that." She knelt to record Eri and jumped back when a jack almost stabbed her. "I was in the bank when Death Arms broke in," she said. "Whoa, what the hell?" "Don't record her," Juru instructed. "This is a delicate situation. I'll let you record anything else, but you keep her out of the shot." The girl simply blew out an agitated puff of air, but it seemed like she wanted to protest. "All right," she complained, pointing the camera up at the roof hole. "It's probably best to uncouple the carts before more Yakuza arrive." Juru remarked, "Good call," and hurried to the rear of the vehicle. Izuku snarled in exasperation as he had to avoid jewel-hardened fists and teeth that were ready to gnaw through bone and flesh. They were keeping him off balance, preventing him from attacking, and containing him. Setsuno was standing behind them, prepared to swing his ill-gained bat, even if he managed to avoid the first two. The fact that the bastard had taken his bat and was using it against him still infuriated him. It just didn't feel right. "Just give up, kid," Hojo growled, his fist piercing the train station wall as Izuku jumped out of the way again, a scream escaping his lips as he barely managed to block Tabe's teeth with his forearm. "Hold him there, Tabe," Setsuno commanded, charging in while brandishing a bat. With a roar, Izuku grabbed Tabe by the throat and swung him in front of Setsuno, saying, "I've had just about enough of you." He bit out, "Shit," as he and his friend collided, slamming into Hojo and completely piercing the wall. "Little shit," Hojo snarled, attempting to shove his companions away from him, but they were held in place by a booted foot landing on top of them. "We got off on the wrong foot," Izuku said sarcastically as he tore his bat from Setsuno's grasp. "Let's start again." Boom. Izuku buried the three Yakuza thugs 2 feet deep, causing the concrete to crack and buckle under the force of his overhead swing. "I'm Izuku, nice to meet you." "Kami," Izuku gasped, struggling to catch his breath, clutching his bleeding right forearm where Tabe had bit, and he took a deep breath before stumbling away and landing on his knees. Overall, the bite wasn't too bad. The teeth had just barely penetrated his skin, and he was bleeding. He mumbled, another thing to add to the WTF column, got back up, and staggered out of the station while looking around the streets. He muttered, "I need to catch up," as his gaze finally settled on a car he could utilize. As he strode toward it, he heard Juru's voice in his mind. "Auto theft? Once more? Appropriating without asking? As she threw another Yakuza thug out the window, Juru snarled. She heard Tokage and Tokiyami battling their own thugs above her. "This is crazy," exclaimed the amateur reporter, who was trying to avoid being struck by any stray bullets from the assailants while videotaping everything. Eri was huddled next to the conductor, peering fearfully around the corner watching Juru battle the Yakuza. "They're determined." Juru called out to the conductor, "You're telling me," with a sigh, "how far away are we from Ua?" "3 more stops," the conductor returned the call. "Sir, what is your name? And what inspired you to help these young heroes in training?" the teenager asked, directing the camera to his face. "I'm Conductor Skane Takagawa," said the elderly gentleman, "and it's rail policy that I keep command of this train at all times." "Wow," she applauded, "what commitment to the work." "I've been conducting this train for 40 years, he grumbled. "My retirement is in a few days, and I'll be damned if I leave this job with a report of a bunch of kids commandeering my train and derailing it because I wasn't at the controls." "That's fair," Juru whispered. "They've stopped," which caused the reporter to turn back to her in bewilderment before her eyes widened. The train rushing along the tracks was the only sound piercing the night now that the fighting had subsided. "Why would they fall back so quickly?" she whispered. You two may want to see this." Juru dashed over, seeing a huge man sprinting in their direction on the tracks. "Oh, come on." Takagawa commanded, "Be ready, you three, we're going to have a rough ride." As the reporter braced against the wall, Juru wrapped her arms around Eri. "Release." The thug staggered back after a group of trash cans slammed into his side, and then a red blur struck his chin with a fist. "Red Gauntlet." Juru yelled, "Kirishima," as she saw her classmate knock the enormous man over the rails. Uraraka exclaimed, Keep going. As she and Tsuyu entered the cart through the wide opening in the roof, followed by Tokiyami and Setsuna. Eraserhead and the other teachers are already waiting at the UA stop, Uraraka said. When Setsuna said, "Thanks for the save," she smiled. Juru told them, "We have a friend coming up from a few stops behind, he's got a metal bat." Tsuyu croaked, "We'll have Kirishima escort him when he catches up." Uraraka was right behind Tsuyu as she bounded the doors off the side and jumped out with a salute. Tokiyami mumbled, "A most auspicious dark banquet," while he was obliviously bandaging a cut on his arm. After catching her breath, Setsuna fell against the wall. "They came in at the right time," she murmured, "we were getting overrun." Giddy with excitement, the amateur reporter exclaimed, "I'm getting that internship." Setsuna said, "Who the hell are you, future reporter for Juzo News?" was the prompt response. Akane Tsunomori. Juru gave an eye roll. Placing a reassuring arm around Eri, she assured her, "We're almost there." With worried eyes, Eri whispered, "Will Papa be alright?" Juru was honest when he said, "Nothing will keep him from you." WVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVW with only one headlight illuminating the street beneath the subway. He roared down the street on a Harley-Davidson while the wind and snow painfully whipped his face. Izuku prepared his bat, letting it follow him like the tattered coat he still wore, because he could hear fighting in front of him. He was only able to catch a fleeting glimpse of a giant man engaged in combat with three vibrant heroes. Izuku continued, revving the bike as he sped past, but he growled, "Coming through," and slammed his bat into the man's chin, sending him reeling into a nearby building. Someone was yelling, but he wasn't going to stop. He needed to return to Eri before things became even more lopsided. A red-haired hero abruptly grabbed the back seat, his feet dragging on the tarmac, bringing his thoughts to a screeching halt. Izuku growled and pulled him completely onto the bike, asking, "What the fuck are you doing?" "Uravati told me to go with you. I'm Red Riot." Izuku let out a groan. "Fine, but you better not slow me down." "Definitely won't, man. Now, watch out." Izuku's eyes darted forward, narrowly avoiding a car. "Fuck you." Burst from the vehicle. Izuku roared away, shouting back, "Fuck me? You're the one driving while on the phone, asshole. Who the fuck is driving during a villain fight? Should take that guy's license away." Holding on for dear life, Kirishima yelled, "Do you even have a license?" as Izuku leapt up a flight of stairs and flew through the terminal before landing on the train tracks. Izuku chuckled and accelerated the engine, asking, "Who needs a license? Who even are you?" "Izuku Midoriya, known to these Yakuza bastards as Metalbat. Nice to meet you." "Oh wow, Mina's been gushing about you since yesterday. Bakugo's had some things to say, too. You're seriously manly dude." "Since yesterday? Watch out." The motorcycle shot off the tracks and into the streets as Izuku applied the brakes and swerved just enough to avoid the yellow transparent barrier in front of them. The tires barely touched it. Without turning around, Izuku yelled, "Holy shit, you alright?" "Yes, indeed, I am alright." Boom. Izuku's eyes grew wide as he watched Kirishima suddenly vanish behind him. The quirkless miscreant swerved, crashing the bike as he fell to his feet just in time to take a strong uppercut that sent him crashing through the same building that Kirishima had just been sent through. Rappa sneered and pushed cars aside as he walked toward the crater where he had just buried the two boys. "All right, kiddies, playtime's over," he said. The ringing in Kirishima's ears made it difficult to hear anything else. The punch had easily broken through his defenses, leaving him a broken mess, but he had hardly had time to harden his body before it had landed. With a slow motion, he looked at the boy next to him, Metal Bat, Izuku Midoriya, whom he had heard Bakugo mention multiple times during their first year together, was bleeding out on the broken foundation of the business office they had just been thrown into. come out, little heroes," Rappa said. "Real men face their deaths with their fists." "Shut the fuck up already." Kirishima's eyes grew wide as he saw Izuku struggle to his feet, leaning heavily on his dented bat, gasping for air as he teetered back and forth, blood streaming down his face. His chest heaved as he swore through his teeth, "Seriously, can't any of you villains learn to read the fucking room?" "Oh," Rappa sighed, "you think you got what it takes to step into the ring with me, shitstain? Drop that dented piece of aluminum and let's duke it out, mano y mano." "That'd put me at a disadvantage," Izuku sneered, glancing at Kirishima. "After all, I am quirkless." "Ain't no one stack bodies like that and not have a quirk," Rappa chuckled. "Believe it or not, it's true." Hey Tengai, this guy for real? A blonde-haired man emerged slowly from the shadows and said, I find it hard to believe, but if what Chrono found was true, then he's not lying. Well, of course, it's difficult to believe. Ain't no quirkless I've ever met can deal out that kind of punishment. With how the world is today, I wouldn't find it too surprising. After all, we have a quirkless hero now in John Henry. Oh, come off it, man. Izuku moved closer to Kirishima as they argued. He mumbled softly, hey man, are you good? As his breathing evened out. Kirishima whispered, I can't. He broke through my quirk, one hit and he broke through. You fucking can, otherwise I'm gonna have to save both of our asses, and my tank's starting to run on empty. So buck up. I can't, Izuku frowned. HMPH, so much for the hero course. That made Kirishima's heart flutter. His eyes grew wide as he saw Izuku stroll over to the two arguing Yakuza and sling his bat over his shoulder. Oi, assholes, he yelled, his chin protruding defiantly and his eyes wide. I think I challenged you, but you haven't responded. Are you already sulking at me, old man? Rappa growled and bounded in the direction of the boy, who instantly swung his bat. Oh, that's it, he said. When the two strong attacks collided, a high-pressure explosion was produced that caused both to slide back. While Izuku shook out his hands in an attempt to restore feeling after the severe blow, Rappa looked down at his fist in disbelief. Rappa smiled maniacally and said, okay, kid, you got my attention. Don't get involved in this one, Tengai. As you wish, brute. The red one is finished, he won't do anything, so fulfill Lord Overhaul's orders. Kill metal bat. With his fists cocked back, Rappa charged once more. Let's see what you can do, kid. Come get some then, motherfucker. Izuku growled as he ran in the direction of his adversary, his explosive strikes repeatedly colliding in a hazy flurry of strikes, parries, and blocks. After a few skirmishes, Rappa's fists easily penetrated Izuku's defenses, and his own attacks were easily repelled. You got power, kid, but you ain't got no technique. What, you think you can just swing a bat, and everything will turn out okay? Izuku clenched his jaw and crashed through a wall, emerging onto the street beyond. Rappa pressed his advantage, and he ducked a couple of jabs and straights before taking a hard uppercut to the jaw. Rappa wound up for another punch and exclaimed, gotta hand it to ya, kid. This is the best fight I've had in years, with excitement. Boom. When he was flung back again, crumpling a car under his weight, Izuku let out a gasp of shock and pain. His right eye felt like it had swelled shut, and his whole body hurt. He sneered and cracked his bloody knuckles, saying, if this is how the quirkless fight, maybe I'll visit John Henry when we're done here. Izuku's left eye opened, and he felt a burning sensation in his chest. Shut up. For a brief moment, Rappa let his guard down and asked, what was that? I said shut up. Crack. Rappa was hurled back through the structure and landed next to a startled Tengai in a cloud of explosive mushrooms. What in the, can't swing a bat and expect everything to turn out okay, who the fuck do you think you are? As Izuku strode toward them, Rappa mumbled, I didn't even see him move, and stood back up, holding his stomach slightly. He looked like hell, was covered in blood, and continued to return for more. Every step he took seemed to tremble the street, and steam rose from his body as he stopped slightly in front of Kirishima, the hit student who was looking at the boy in amazement. Izuku clutched his bat with both hands and yelled, with this bat in my hands I can do anything I set my mind to, thumping his chest with his free hand. I don't need a quirk, luck, or even my eyes to do what needs to be done. All I need is this bat, my willpower, and a can-do fucking attitude. So come on, make my fucking day you Italian mobster wannabe motherfuckers, he said. Rappa charged forward, starting the much-desired fight because he imagined an even faster-paced match. Izuku's arms suddenly lacked speed, as if time had stopped. It fucking picks now out of all the possible times for this new strength to fail. As his final demise approached, Izuku cursed in his head. Well, I'm going to look like a jerk for yelling and then passing away immediately after. Red Riot. Unbreakable. The sight of the once catatonic Red Riot slipping between the two, his ragged form bearing the brunt of Rappa's new explosive attacks, made Izuku's eye widen. What the hell? He was blown away so easily before. As he watched Kirishima take blow after blow, Izuku stumbled back again and at last took a deep breath. He clenched his bat in his hands and whispered, Kirishima, as the heat in his chest began to rise once more. All right, let's go, kid. Rappa growled, preparing to strike the boy with his most powerful blow. Kirishima roared, "Ah arg," and pushed his fist forward, but a yellow barrier appeared between them. Rappa angrily proclaimed, "I told you not to get involved." To Tengai, "We cannot risk this mission. Besides, the boy's spent. Then I guess it's my turn again." Izuku was suddenly lunging forward, bat coming forward in a blazing attack, and Tengai's eyes widened. "Watch closely," Izuku growled. "I'm about to show you what a fighting spirit can do." Rappa yelled, "Drop the barrier." At Tengai, with a shudder in his voice, Tengai muttered, "It'll hold." As the bat effortlessly sliced through his quirk, breaking it like glass as it broke the sound barrier. Both of them were struck by the wide strike, which went through and sent them flying down the street, crashing through 2 buildings. Izuku spit out more blood and huffed, "Kid, my ass," before collapsing to his knees. He was kept upright by almost collapsing before he could get his bat under him. He looked back at the boy, who was lying in his own crater, gasping for air, and coughed out, "Red Riot. You good? Oi, Kirishima, you alive? Don't make me use the bat," he said. With her eyes slightly open, Kirishima moaned, "I'm not dead. I can't move." Izuku sighed and stumbled to his feet before approaching the other boy. "Bout right there with ya. Bud, come on, we gotta get to UA." Izuku pulled Kirishima to his feet, and he cried out in a choked voice. He forced himself to say, "We were only a few stops away," as they staggered down the street. Izuku muttered, "Eri and the others should be there by now," and he pulled his bat along with them. Kirishima muttered, "Bakugo and the other 1A students will be on standby, we just gotta." The boy fell forward in a dead faint, dragging Izuku down with him, his bat sticking in a snow drift at their side. "Kirishima, Kirishima," Izuku cried frantically. "Kirishima, come on man, stay awake. How'd you do it?" Glancing down at the injured student, Izuku froze. With a gentle sigh, Kirishima fell unconscious. "You're a civilian," he whispered softly, "but you stood up to them, like it was nothing. You weren't scared. How?" Izuku sat back in the snowdrift and sighed. He mumbled, "What can I say?" pulling out a partially ruined pack of cigarettes and locating one that wasn't broken or crumpled. "I guess I got tired of getting told I couldn't," he said, lighting it with a battered lighter and exhaling smoke. "You came in clutch though, would have been dead if you hadn't moved. You're a real hero." The crunch of snow made Izuku's ears perk up, and he slowly turned his head to look at the approaching figure. Overhaul droning, "Metal bat, you're a hard man to find." Izuku sighed deeply and let his head drop for a while. Izuku muttered, "You rest here, Kirishima," taking hold of his bat and balancing on unsteady legs after giving the fallen hero a shoulder pat. He stood against Overhaul, a cloud of smoke blown out of his nostrils, ash crumbling away from the cigarette in the corner of his mouth, and a bat resting languidly in his right hand. He scoffed and said, "You Yakuza have shit timing. WVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVWVW." Their directives were unambiguous. They would be allowed to reinforce the hit students in town if Kirishima failed to arrive at the scheduled check in time. 30 minutes have passed since then. Bakugo and his classmate Todoroki were now speeding along the railway as Bakugo exploded through the city. "That slow-mo fuck really irritated me, so we had better avoid being late. Damn it, we spent too long on those grunts." Bakugo growled. "Relax Bakugo, we'll get there on time," Todoroki continued, "besides, we sent her ahead." Akane trembled from her hiding spot behind a pile of debris, her fear barely contained. When they arrived at the UA stop, she doubled back and started running back towards town, taking advantage of the teachers fussing over their students and the odd little girl. Fortunately, she discovered a bike that significantly accelerated it. She had arrived just in time to witness Metal Bat launch 2 Yakuza into the air. Oh, the video and images she captured would permanently establish her career. But then she noticed his roughness. The man who became a legend in a week didn't look old enough to be a legend, limping down the street with his collapsing partner propped up, and he looked like he could die at any time. She wasn't sure whether she wanted to sell those photos or if she would be able to. She nearly ran towards them when they fell, but she had to quickly hide when another Yakuza Gyeonggu appeared. Kai Chisaki as the Yakuza, not just a Gyeonggu. Redesign. Grainy photos hardly gave them a glimpse of the powerful and withdrawn Major Domo, and she had heard rumors about him online about a lot of things. Here he was, looking down at a metal bat that was smoking. Akane started recording after carefully raising her camera and trying to keep her hand from shaking. Overhaul droning, "You're a hard man to find." Metal bat halted a few yards from the contemporary folk hero. The boy put his hand on his injured friend's shoulder and got to his feet. With a cigarette dangling from the corner of his lip and a bat slackly grasped in his right hand, he sneered, "You Yakuza have shit timing. You sure you don't have that backwards?" Overhaul asked. "A whole week you've been interrupting my plans, my business, injuring and outright killing my men. All for what? To destroy everything, when we're on the cusp of greatness." His pupils widened. Or was all of this because of some girl? He spat the cigarette butt into the snow and leaned his bat against his shoulder. "Yeah, some girl," he said, blowing smoke out of his nostrils, "some poor little 6-year-old girl who deserves a lot more than you probably gave her. Covered in needle marks and scars, scared to be alone for even a minute." Overhaul attempted to rationalize, saying, "If you only knew the true power she held." "She's a child," Izuku yelled, "a little girl who deserves to be having tea parties and running around at playgrounds, not be demoted to some Yakuza plaything. Her purpose is so much more than you assume of me," Overhaul yelled. "I don't care for her. She's not my sister, daughter, or kin. If you think I'm desperate for her body, you're completely mistaken. Her quirk is what's so important. No quirk out there is important enough to torture a child," he responded. "You say that, but what if I told you that it's essential to developing a medication that eliminates quirks?" At that, there was a stunned silence. Akane nearly dropped her phone at the ridiculous cry, "Erase quirks." How insane was this guy? So the rumors are true. Akane leaned closer after hearing the hushed statement, which was hardly audible over the roaring wind. Metal Bat muttered, "I've been seeing a lot of chatter online lately, but before this week, there were only rumors floating around. There have been stories of heroes having their quirks taken away before they are killed. The most recent example involved a UA student who survived but was reportedly unable to use his quirk for more than 4 hours. I assumed it was conjecture, perhaps it was a quirk they hadn't yet catalogued. I suppose I'm not mistaken. Ares' quirk is to rewind living things. You're understanding now. This makes things easier," Overhaul said, advancing one more step. She could theoretically undo wounds and injuries on a small scale, but it was revealed that she could undo things on a large scale to the point where they stopped existing, which is what she did to her father when her quirk first came on. Even Metal Bat appeared to stumble a little, and Akane covered her mouth in a gasp. "Because it seemed so similar to mine, the former boss wanted me to find out more about her quirk and assist her in controlling it. It was anything but, and after learning what she was capable of, I knew what I needed to do." He took another step, his arms outstretched, and his voice became fervent, saying, "Quirks are a disease. This corrupt hero society we live in has been brought on by a sickness. I can remove that using Ares' quirk. Put humanity back on course for evolution by destroying the illness. Metal Bat, do you not see that? Ultimately, you yourself, aren't you quirkless?" Akane dropped her phone this time, but she quickly picked it up because she didn't want to miss anything. "So, you won't say that I'm concealing a quirk, will you?" "It wouldn't have been difficult to figure out who I was," Metal Bat sneered. "You shit stains have a way of finding out information, right?" He sneered at Overhaul's surprised look. "What? Do you really think that because I lack what 80% of the world has, I will abandon my beliefs? Since I don't have a quirk, do you think I'd want to get together with you to destroy them all? I retract my thoughts about you. Prior to this, I believed you to be a chomo asshole who should be buried. You can take whatever you're offering and shove it up your ass," he said, pointing his bat at Overhaul, almost touching the plague mask he was wearing. "Now I find out you're a psycho freak who thinks quirks are bad. Quirks has been a shit show throughout human history, but that doesn't mean the world is broken and corrupt." The words, "You don't know the mistake you're making, boy," were hissed by Overhaul. Izuku growled low in his throat, "Oh, no, I know the choice I made, bitch, and I'm willing to die for it. Do you believe you can accomplish the same?" There was silence again, almost poetic in its stillness, the wind seeming to pause in expectation as the clouds parted for the first time in weeks, revealing a full moon. Then Overhaul happened. Before turning on the balls of his feet and sprinting, he grabbed Kirishima and dove behind the pile of debris that Akane was hiding behind just as a second blow grazed his back. He leapt back at crazy speeds as he dragged his now gloveless hand across the asphalt, sending earth and spikes hurtling towards Metal Bat, who destroyed them with a strong swing. "Fuck," he snarled out, turning to glance over his cover, only to find Akane beside him shaking like a leaf, her phone still up and recording him. "What the fuck are you doing here?" Izuku insisted on knowing. She stammered, future reporter," before he shoved her away from him and swung his bat out to stop another spike attack. "Anyway, run and grab Kirishima," he yelled. "I can't fight if I'm worried about the two of you," and then he took off for Overhaul. She started to say, "But I can't just," but was almost knocked down by a gust of wind, which was caused by Izuku slamming his bat into the road just inches from hitting a surprised Overhaul. The force of the blow shook the buildings next to them and buffeted the snow drifts. "Leave." As he charged Overhaul once more, he roared. Gulping, Akane said, "Okay, yeah, good idea," and then she started dragging Kirishima away after bringing him up. "Metal Bat, how much do you have left?" After a week of not eating, sleeping, or fighting, and now with injuries, Overhaul mocked, "You could pass out at any moment." "I have enough left over to handle you." Izuku growled and charged in to try to deliver a blow, but he had to alter his plan because the street around him appeared to be warped by Overhaul's quirk, forcing him to dodge rebar and rock spikes while avoiding rock pillars that were trying to crush him or send him hurtling into the air. His vision was starting to blur, his feet stumbling more than landing firmly under him, and his chest burning with each forced inhalation. The lack of oxygen was ringing his vision with dark spots. "Boy, you're outmatched. Your strength will eventually fail you. All I'm losing is time," yelled Overhaul. Another spike grazed Izuku's side, and he thought, "He's too fast." A pillar swung a glance at his back, sending him sprawling, and he barely managed to roll back to his feet in time to avoid another one that ripped the remnants of his jacket to pieces. And he's right, "I'm running on empty, I can't." As more spikes flew in his direction, he gasped as another pillar struck his chest directly, expelling the air and leaving him motionless. Izuku closed his eyes and thought, "Fuck. I'm sorry, Eri." SMAAAAAASH. Boom. Several already collapsed businesses were leveled as a blur of blue struck the ground, flattening the landscape within 100 yards and sending Kai flying back due to the excessive wind pressure. She was wearing a deep blue Kevlar mesh jumpsuit with red and white accents, reminiscent of All Might's costume but much more padded, and Izuku's eyes snapped open, staring incredulously at the figure who somehow managed to keep the damage to the front of her, blonde hair waving slightly behind her, neon blue arcs of electricity sparked off her muscular frame. "It's all right. You can step back, Metal Bat." The girl gave him a comforting smile before Izuku stumbled back and collapsed on his butt. "Because I am present." Izuku chuckled softly and said, "Melissa, fucking, shield." He wheezed as his lungs filled with air again, saying, "I really am dead." "What? Hey, don't say that." Flustered, she exclaimed, "I'm the best in my class. Remember to stay vigilant." Kai walked slowly back over, his forehead bleeding, and Melissa yelled as she had to pick Izuku up and jump away as more spikes came shooting up. "You're gonna regret that, brat. Who the devil is this individual?" As they moved back down the street, Melissa yelled. Izuku muttered as they came to a halt. "Kai Chisaki, aka Overhaul, don't know the exact details of his quirk but he's able to change the environment with 5-point contact." "Got it, you sit tight." Izuku sneered, forcing himself to inhale deeply in spite of the sharp pain in his chest. "Fuck that noise, he's strong. I don't think you can handle him alone." "You're injured, severely," she stated, "you probably have internal bleeding." "I ain't done until that son of a bitch is 6 feet under," Izuku yelled. "Besides, I need to catch my breath, and I still managed to get in a couple good swings. I will make them matter." "Why are all of you muscle heads so damn stubborn?" Melissa sighed. "Okay, I'll try to keep his attention. If you think you can end this, then end it," she said, boosting her quirk. Stumbling slightly, Izuku raised his bat and said, "Don't have much choice, you can count on me." He then blasted off, leaving a tiny crater where he did so. But this time, a blur of lightning was streaking beside him, bringing her leg around in a biting roundhouse and flattening the way again. Overhaul snarled as he brought his hand down again, sending a rippling wave of destruction at Izuku, who roared as he brought his bat forward. The impact carved a path straight through the wave as he continued running, sliding under spikes and pillars once more. "Go on, I've got you covered." As more spikes and rebar came after her, she yelled and ran away. Izuku simply frowned and pushed the heat in his chest to burn as hot as he could. Steam poured off his body as he grew faster and faster, putting all of his remaining energy into a single, decisive blow. It processed in slow motion, and Kai only had time to feel his eyes widen as he watched Metal Bat charge at him, his green eyes burning with righteous anger, the wind buffeting around him as he swung his bat. Kai watched in shock as the last of his defenses broke. Overhaul thought, he's a monster, just before the bat struck his side and sent him hurtling through the rest of a collapsed building with a loud crack, sending smoke, debris, and rubble skyward. Melissa slid to a stop next to him, breathing a little unevenly, her uniform covered in scratches and scrapes, and Izuku took a few deep breaths, steadying himself as the roaring died in his ears. The hero in training sighed and wiped her hands on herself, saying, "Glad we didn't have to draw that out." Izuku staggered back a little and mumbled, "Hey, yeah," before crumpling. "Hey, hey, hey," Melissa yelled and hurried over to join him, saying, "Hey, stay with me." Trying to keep his eyes open and focused while his bat rolled out of his hand, Izuku slurred, "Not going anywhere, fuck, I'm tired." Melissa commanded, "Stay awake, damn it," as she started to examine him thoroughly. Due to the severity of his injuries, he was essentially bare-chested, so she was shocked to discover that both of his arms were broken in multiple places, his chest was uneven and bumpy from multiple rib fractures, the skin on his abdomen was discolored from internal bleeding, and there were signs of breaks in his legs. However, he was still conscious, glaring defiantly at the sky because he was unable to concentrate on her, and he was already attempting to get back up on his feet, his hand limply feeling around for his bat. "All right, you must remain downstairs now," Melissa commanded, exasperated at the boy in front of her. "Eri, she's safe. Don't worry about her right now. You're way too injured to be moving." He wheezed and halted his movement, saying, "That hasn't stopped me yet. I need to get back to her." She took out a medication pack and tried her best to set his broken arms and legs. "We'll get there, but right now, we need to treat your wounds as best we can," she said anxiously. Boom. "Oi Blondie, you dead." Bakugo Katsuki rushed onto the scene, already looking about as if he were prepared for a fight, and Melissa sighed in frustration as she glared at him. "I'm fine, but Metal Bat needs a medic." Bakugo snarled and started to grab his phone. "I already contacted them," Shoto said as he approached. "ETA 10 minutes, they're busy with other fights downtown." Death Arms was attacked from behind by his own sidekicks. Izuku's head lifted slightly as Bakugo growled, "Stupid, shitty Deku. Scum," he scoffed, looking down at Metal Bat, his eyes growing distant. "You know the old hag's been worried sick about you. I oughta throttle you now." Bakugo stiffened slightly as Izuku scoffed wearily, "Fuck off, Katsuki," saying, "I'm not in the mood for your tantrums." "What the fuck did you just say to me?" he growled, his hands clenched. Izuku spat, "You fucking heard me," and tried to get back up again, shrugging off Melissa as he regained his balance. "What, should I be kissing your ass because you sent help for the first time in your life?" Todoroki looked at Bakugo, who growled low in the back of his throat, and asked, "You sent Jiro?" With surprise. "I gave her a tip, just a damn hunch, didn't know if he'd actually be at Old Mix." Izuku complained, "I wasn't," and he dragged his bat behind him as he stumbled past Bakugo without turning to face the boy, who was standing there grimly. "Jiro was lucky she ran into me at the old projects. Old Mix got burned to the ground a day after the police station went up." Izuku stopped at a sign and leaned heavily against it. Melissa said, "All the Yakuza," with a bitter tone, hovering over the boy. "Todoroki, go secure Overhaul. He's in that building over there." Todoroki turned to leave, murmuring, "Your work, I presume. Actually, you can thank Metal Bat for that particular crater." Melissa's remark made Todoroki halt in his tracks. "Excuse me." Bakugo spit out, "No damn way. He's quirkless." "I still don't know what the hell's going on," Izuku said, biting out. Bakugo's eyes widened slightly as the boy spun around on him, ripping the sign he had been holding out of the ground. "The fuck does that mean, Deku?" Bakugo yelled. "I mean, I don't fucking know," Izuku exclaimed, hurling the pole down with a hint of hysteria. "1 second, I'm minding my fucking business trying to get my clothes washed, next thing I know, I'm being throttled by Yakuza hitmen. You think I fucking questioned my newfound strength after that? You think that first swing that put a man through 2 buildings didn't scare the ever-loving shit out of me? I didn't have that fucking luxury, Katsuki, I had a little girl to fucking protect. I cracked, she was done for. I relaxed for a second at that police precinct and the Yakuza burned it to the ground. All to try and get at me and that little girl. All because I listened to the police that they would protect me. That Smile Man and Verdant showing up meant the heroes would protect me. Instead, I watched as those two heroes killed their friends. Officers they'd known for fucking years. And for what? A Yakuza payout. Midoriya. Melissa reached out to him to cut him off, but Izuku stumbled away. Don't. He spat, heaving his chest and swaying slightly. He had allowed this to sit for too long, even though it hurt to stand and to scream. He stumbled and fell back against a big slab of concrete, saying, "Don't fucking try. I don't need to hear how. Everything will be alright, because it ain't. You know how many people died that night. Or every other night until now. You know how many people I had to kill." With a little wind kicking up from the warning, the three teenagers attempted to run to his aid but jumped back when he swiped his bat at them. They could practically see the energy slowly leaking out of him as he hissed, "Keep your hands off me," and his arm fell limp to his side. "God damn it," he swore, holding his head with a trembling hand. He vaguely remembered an ambulance approaching. Kirishima was carried further down the street by a civilian, somewhere that way. He pointed hazily down the road while glaring down at the asphalt and avoiding eye contact with any of them. "He's pretty roughed up, he'll need a hospital too." After that he remained silent. As the paramedics examined him and loaded him into the ambulance, he simply avoided looking at them. Moments later, Kirishima was brought in. The amateur reporter who had pulled him 2 blocks away was observing them, her phone clenched in her hands as she snapped additional photos of Bakugo and Todoroki holding the injured Yakuza in the area, of Froppy and Uravati showing up with their own arrestees and a number of police cruisers. The teams were sent to Ua, where all nearby injured were being taken, after uniformed police officers and detectives swiftly took control of the scene. Even so, Izuku remained silent, not when they arrived at the high school of his past fantasies, not when he saw All Might looking at him in disbelief from a doorway in an office, and not even when Eri slammed into his wounded chest, happy to stay in his protective embrace forever. He remained silent. He didn't have to. Aki was right behind Yorobi as he bounded out of the airport, frantically looking for his keys. Pulling the keys out of his own pocket with a playful jingle, he asked breathlessly as they ran through the 3-story parking garage, "He's at Ua, right?" Pulling out his phone to try to hide his slight embarrassment, Aki opened the back door of their Kia Soul and said, "Yes, Aizawa says he's safe. Extensively injured." John Henry. John slid to a halt and spun around in bewilderment to see 2 heroes sprinting in his direction. One was wearing a black and red jumpsuit with orange-tinted goggles and an armored helmet, while the other was wearing a white jumpsuit with porcupine quills sticking out of his back. "Quill, Vent, what are you two doing here?" With slightly shifting eyes, Quill said, "Here to escort you to UA. There's no need for it, the entire city's dealing with riots, why escort us?" John said, his eyes narrowing. Vent stepped forward and grunted, "Come with us. Now, we don't question our orders, John." As a familiar weight slipped into his hand, Aki cautiously whispered, "Yorobi. Go ahead, I'll meet you there." With a sigh, he began to walk forward when Vent was abruptly struck by a tree branch and collided with a nearby truck. Kamui Woods, whose uniform was ripped and his arms and face mask were charred in spots, swung into the parking lot and yelled frantically, "John Henry. Don't trust them. They're Yakuza." John snarled as one of the spines struck his shoulder, but he was hardly quick enough to get Aki out of the way as Quill blasted a volley of spines out of his back, determined to skewer them both. "Yorobi," exclaimed Aki, "I'm fine. Get clear." Vent growled as his hands began to heat up, scorching the bark that was wrapped around him. Kamui was forced to release his grip and swing away as he blasted extremely hot air at him in a narrow stream using his special gloves. "Now I'm a turn ya into kindling," he said. "Should have stayed down, matchstick. Incoming." Boom. John Henry brought his 20-pound hammer around and smashed the concrete he had just been up against as Quill slammed into the wall next to Vent, forcing the heat user to dive away. As he rolled to his feet, he roared, "You almost killed my fiancé." His booted foot came down, narrowly missing Vent's chest. He blasted both with blazing winds that caused John Henry to dive behind a car, the metal frame slowly warping. With a crack, Kamui Woods's limbs burst into flames and he screamed. He fell backward, colliding with the divider and plummeting into the chilly night air after his current limb broke. "Kamui!" exclaimed John Henry, his heart pounding as he leapt over the car and threw his hammer at Vent, whose quirk caused the handle to turn to ash and flames in a matter of seconds. But instead of slowing down, the metal hammer head struck Vent's chest, sending him crashing to the ground. John fell against the chilly concrete as he stumbled towards the divider, hardly paying attention to Fat Gum and Sunniator running onto the scene. His eyes were racing to the other side, and he exhaled in relief when he noticed Kamui unconscious in a snowbank. When Fat Gum finally made it to John Henry, he told his work-study student, Sunniator, "Restrain those two." Aki arrived at the same moment with a med kit in his hands. The young hero's arms were a gleaming red, and his shoulder spine was heavily bleeding. "Where's Kamui?" Fat Gum swore. "Damn it, we were too slow." Fat Gum grimaced at the condition of the Arbor hero as John gritted his teeth and said, "Down there. He risked himself to buy me some time. He was already injured trying to stop them downtown after they turned on Death Arms and Powerloader. They're banged up but they'll live. We're able to take down Verdant and Smile Man, but these guys were coming here to settle a score with you. Guess they wanted to go out settling a score." In an attempt to assist John Henry, Aki inquired anxiously, "All of this because of something Izuku found?" "I'm not sure the details, but that Midoriya kid's got a bounty on his head, over 1 million yen at this point. The Yakuza want blood, but there's not many left at this point." He stuck his thumb over the now suppressed heroes and villains. "These guys jumped ship once they realized they weren't gonna be able to kill Death Arms and the others. Verdant ratted them out on what they planned to do if they were found out. Top of their list was to kill you." The reason John Henry guessed was, "Because I'm quirkless." When everyone looked over, Sunniator covered his face and said, "And because you were beating them in most cases closed this month." "Well, whatever the case, they need to get taken to lock up, and we need to get you and Kamui to the hospital." He attempted to counter, "No, we need to get to UA, but Aki interrupted. "You need a hospital," he stated bluntly. "Izuku is safe, we can go see him when you're healed." As officers and an EMS bus arrived, he moaned but accepted his fate. What exactly had transpired during his absence? WVWVW. Shota Aizawa felt worn out. He had received some reports regarding the Yakuza issue in Mustafu. His students had mostly behaved during their weekly work studies and weekend breaks, and he had even managed to have a peaceful, enjoyable dinner with Shino, something he hadn't been able to do since before the summer camp disaster. His weekend had begun in a straightforward manner. In addition to a week-long blizzard that got worse at its worst, everything went to hell on Saturday night. He now had a traumatized child, an injured student, a wounded vigilante who killed an unknown number of Yakuza in self-defense, 3 students who definitely did not have permission to act, and another student who persuaded the first one to do so. He knew Tsukauchi would accompany him to ensure the veracity of the boy's story as he walked through Ua on his way to retrieve the vigilante, a boy named Izuku Midoriya, for questioning. However, he was taken aback to discover Toshinori Yagi waiting with the detective at the infirmary's doors. "Eraserhead, I thought you were with Interrogation," Yagi said. When Yagi winced at the name, Aizawa raised an eyebrow and said, "I was just coming to retrieve Midoriya." As soon as Tsukauchi muttered, "He's not here, we were told you sent officers to collect him." The 3 of them raced down the hall toward the interrogation room, where they were shocked to see 2 Hero Association detectives questioning Izuku Midoriya. The boy appeared rough, with dark bags under his eyes and pale skin. His arms, legs, and a portion of his neck and head were covered in gauze, and his long green hair protruded at odd angles from the bandages. He appeared to be steadfastly refusing to respond to the detectives' inquiries. Tsukauchi stopped Aizawa as he was about to interrupt, saying, "Wait. Let's listen in, see what the Hero Association wants." WVWVW. Izuku was worn out. He had only been awake for an hour when the doors were flung open and 2 men, who appeared to be the executives who occasionally visited the construction sites, strode in. Eri had refused to leave his side, and the recovery girl had been urging the 2 to have a small breakfast. They had flashed detective badges, said Eraserhead was prepared for interrogation, and said they had to take Izuku to the interrogation room right away. They were dressed in pricey gray suits and black wool overcoats. This was incorrect because Eri had a panic attack. Izuku and the recovery girl spent a few minutes calming her down by telling her that the detectives were not malicious and that he only needed to ask him questions. He wished he had simply argued until someone else arrived. Since Eraserhead wasn't present, they quickly chained him to the metal table in the cinderblock room and put him in quirk suppression cuffs. They then began questioning him. What they were doing was obvious. The lead man flattened his beard and glared at Izuku, asking, "What happened the night of the precinct attack?" His partner was pacing behind Izuku and glaring at him as well. Izuku complained, "Smile Man and Verdant, I already told you. We know you were the cause of the fire and the death of 5 police officers. The partner yelled, slapping Izuku upside the head. Izuku didn't flinch because he had received harder blows than that before. Stop lying, you little skell. Izuku yelled back at him, you're full of shit, causing his barely healed ribs to ache from a hard shove that left his chest bouncing against the table. Either you come clean or you're going to be looking at years, he growled, slamming his hand down on the table. We have witnesses, egghead. Do you understand the damage you've caused over the last week? The detective in question continued, 5 police dead, several civilians injured including a store owner, and 15 dead, 15. They were trying to kill me, Izuku yelled, me and that little girl that was with me. You mean the kidnapped child? I didn't kidnap shit, more slaps and shoves. You were torturing this girl with your murderous rampage for an entire week. You didn't have a license to use your quirk. Then, to support your outrageous stunt, you have 3 hit students. Either you come clean or I swear you'll be going away for a long time, the lead detective said, disregarding his remarks and his partner's roughhousing. Izuku cocked his head in bewilderment and said, I don't have a quirk. For some reason, that was the statement that bothered him the most out of everything this guy had said. You expect us to believe that after all the harm you caused? He sneered. When Izuku got another painful slap, he grinned painfully and said, believe it or not, Piggy, it's true. Been quirkless since I was born, check my records. He took out a file and slammed it onto the table, saying, oh yeah, we checked them. It turned out to be his file, with a real good patch job, must have paid a pretty penny for it, it even looks legal. Izuku whispered, focusing his attention on the quirk status, quirkless in bold red letters, that destroyed his life, because it is. The feats you accomplished, the bodies you stacked, the 3 blocks of buildings that were damaged or destroyed, all of this, proves that what this file says, is crap. Then take it up with the doctor who told me I was quirkless. Izuku exploded, I haven't lied yet. You've been lying to us since you've sat down, now let's start from the beginning. Izuku ignored him and looked down at the quirk suppression cuffs. The red lights that indicated that a quirk was being stopped were dark, and even though his chest was burning hot, there was no power humming through them. What do you have to say for yourself? Izuku glanced up at the detective. There had been a period in his life when he was a sobbing mess, completely respectful and obedient to their every word in the hopes of getting away with it. However, those times are over. Izuku now gave the detective a glare in return, clenching his fists and leaning forward slightly, his entire body, battered and bruised, ready to move. Izuku threw his head back and gave the detective behind him a satisfying crunch as he bit out, oink, oink. Piggy was clearly audible as Izuku leapt to his feet, effortlessly escaping the cuffs that suppressed his quirk. In retrospect, it made sense that both detectives had strength enhancer quirks because they easily manhandled him, slamming him into the wall and painfully bringing his arms behind his back. That was as far as he got as the 2 detectives pounced on him. Izuku prepared himself for additional officers to beat him to a bloody pulp as the door flew open. Rather, he was taken aback when the 2 detectives were abruptly dragged back by strands of cloth, causing Izuku to collapse where he was standing before being grabbed by 2 big, slender hands. Easy, young Midoriya, you're in no condition to be roughhousing like that. Izuku froze, gazing at All Might, the same scrawny figure he had seen on that rooftop all those years before. The man's attempt at a friendly smile turned into a clumsy grimace. As he entered behind Aizawa and placed the 2 in suppression cuffs, Naomasa snarled at them, saying, you be facing one hell of a case once I get back to the precinct. Until then, Eraser, secure them. You 2 have the interrogation? The man asked, avoiding eye contact with Izuku as he hobbled into his chair and dismissed Yagi's offer of assistance. Naomasa nodded firmly and said, we'll be fine, get them out of here. With a nod, Aizawa pulled the 2 men away, leaving the 3 of them by themselves. Catching the young man off guard in his thoughts, Naomasa said, I'm extremely sorry about what just occurred. The young man flinched a little. I promise they will be punished to the full extent of the law. He was a far cry from the rude and combative youngster they had witnessed arguing with the 2 detectives. The boy in front of them was cautious, worn out, and uncertain of himself, taken by surprise by the abrupt change of interrogators. Thank you, he said softly, attempting to determine whether they were being sincere or if this was a planned incident. We don't want to keep you any longer than we have to, Naomasa continued, setting up a tape recorder. We only need to ask you what occurred since you were declared missing, and how you came to be here at UA. Are you up to do this now? He leaned back in his chair, cradling his ribs absently, and muttered, yeah, let's get this over with. Now, what happened the night of December 18th? Naomasa asked as he switched on the recorder. I was going to the laundromat after hitting some balls at the batting cages. He explained, was out of clothes and was really pushing it, so had to be done. You were hitting baseballs in the middle of the blizzard? Yagi asked, stunned, turning to face Naomasa, who indicated with a tiny finger that what he was saying was accurate. Yeah, a bit painful with the cold, but worth it. He cracked a smile before it disappeared. So yeah, I went to the laundromat, cursing my luck for not being able to use a friend's machines, and that's when Eri ran in. Eri being the little girl you've been protecting this past week? Replied Yagi. Yes, she rushed in and hid in the corner. A few seconds later, a group of thugs passed by. One of them glanced inside, but I doubted he saw her. I began urging her to leave while attempting to come up with a strategy to get her assistance when the Stone brothers broke through the wall and sent me running across the room. How did you make it through? Yagi leaned forward as Naomasa asked, having heard the boy affirm that he had no quirk and that what he was saying was accurate. What was this power he possessed, then? Was it some sort of support equipment he created? Was it a passing effect of someone else's eccentricity? Perhaps someone else was assisting him? Beats me. I was able to get back on my feet after shaking myself out of it. I grabbed my bat, and I sent one Stone brother through 2 buildings with a single swing. After staring at him incredulously, Yagi turned to face Naomasa, who was looking at him with astonishment. Naomasa explained, you don't know how you did it. Shaking his head, Izuku complained, no idea, haven't had much of a luxury to think about it over the last week. He flexed his hand and said, I took out the stones and immediately took off with Eri, they weren't far behind. We hid in Old Mix and changed clothes. How is he? I know they burned his place down, he said worriedly. He was admitted to the hospital due to smoke inhalation, but he will fully recover, Yagi assured, somewhat relieving Izuku of another burden. Good, Old Mix helped me a lot. What transpired after you left Old Mix? He's helped a lot of people over the years. Yagi concurred. We went to the precinct, made it too, he sighed, had 5 cops who knew what was going on, one called in the heroes they knew, and it turned out to be the wrong ones. Yakuza arrived before them, blew up the building, and Smile Man and Verdant followed in an attempt to apprehend us. They killed the cops with us, and if the detective hadn't given us enough time to leave, they would have gotten us too. Quietly, Naomasa confirmed, she was found crushed under a pile of rubble. Izuku silently nodded, I spent the better part of 7 hours dodging Yakuza and those heroes. Luckily I helped construct half of those new high-rises and I know the area. So I was able to find a place to catch some sleep for just a bit before going on again. It wasn't perfect. We ran into several patrols throughout the week. I took care of them. Yagi inquired, and what does that mean? I defended myself and Eri, and I know you know what that means, All Might. Please don't make me say it, he repeated in a weak voice. I took care of it. You had no other option, would you say? Naomasa inquired. Definitely, Izuku replied. They were out to kill me. I couldn't hold back, and it wasn't like I had much time to practice restraint. You were able to pull your hits better in your fights with the 8 precepts, Naomasa stated. Only one is critical, and they believe he'll pull through. That doesn't make me feel any better, Izuku grumbled. The only one I should have killed was Kaichisaki. Yagi attempted to lighten the situation by saying, he was the one critical, so you gave it your best. What brings you here? Izuku inquired, and Naomasa glanced uneasily between the two. What are you saying? I am, he inquired. Why are you here? A retired hero who isn't involved in any ongoing investigations. What? He inquired. Has Bakugo mentioned that I'd like to meet All Might? He was unaware of what you had said when we last met, so I wouldn't be surprised. Yagi began to say, young Midoriya, but Izuku interrupted him. He whispered, save it. It's not that you were wrong at the time, but you're the worst person to be present at this point. He was brought in as a consultant for the Yakuza. Tsukachi clarified that he was the one to shut them down in the first place after all. All Might winced as Izuku sneered, think you missed some. But I guess I'm stuck with you, where was I? You were describing your time on the street, getting to the point where Earphone Jack linked up with you. When she was chasing after me, Izuku nearly brained her with a rock. I didn't realize she was there to help me until she mentioned Bakugo. Based on what she said, he asked if she could check out Old Mix place because he knows I occasionally go there when I'm in trouble. I was surprised he remembered. Izuku laughed. Are the two of you friends? Izuku put it bluntly. No, and that's all I'm saying on that matter. Jiru called her hero mentor after we realized we weren't on the wrong side, and we were hit almost immediately after. We ended up hotwiring a truck and fleeing, but we managed to call Tokiyami and Setsuna before they were on us again. I agreed to meet Juru at Takoba Beach and bailed so I could remove the 2 trucks that were following us. We have the video surveillance of the street for that fight. You were brutal, Yagi murmured. I did what I had to. Izuku grumbled, any less and I wouldn't be standing here. Well, how do you feel about Tokiyami and Setsuna? Naomasa inquired. Juru contacted Tokiyami, and Set's my ex-girlfriend. Yagi muttered, it's a bit weird to contact your ex. We broke up on amicable terms. He reluctantly replied, we don't hate each other at least. They showed up at Takoba a few minutes after I did. We decided to risk the train since the heroes would be hitting Yakuza strongholds all over town. We thought we'd be able to ooh with little problem. Shit went foobar right from the start. Tsukachi nodded and said, another fight we got on camera, so this is where you split up. Yeah. Izuku replied, only way we could keep Aries safe after those 2 goons knocked us on our ass. We were lucky I was able to fight that nausea quirk off before that trio got there. All 5 are currently in the hospital in critical condition. According to Naomasa, at this point an advanced team of UA students were sent in to reinforce and cover the exfil team, Uraraka Ochako, Asui Suyu, and Kirishima Ajiro. Hero names Uravity, Froppy and Red Riot. How is Red doing? Thought he died for a bit out there, Izuku inquired. Toshinori responded on Naomasa's behalf, saying, he was critical when they brought him in last night, but he's since stabilized. All right, so you want to know about the altercation we had after I took the motorcycle? Actually we have everything from there unaccounted for. Naomasa responded, we had an amateur reporter recording your fight with Rappa and his counterpart, as well as the beginning of the fight with Overhaul. The rest was filled in by UA's hit students. The only manner of business now, he turned off the recorder, is to discuss what happens now. As of right now, you're considered a ward of UA, until your guardian can come, Toshinori said. I don't have a guardian, he stated bluntly, I've been living on my own for almost a year. Coughing uneasily, Toshinori said, oh, I apologize. Well, then, once you've healed, you'll be allowed to leave. No charges will be filed against you, Naomasa assured him. Everything has been justified under self-defense, and you as well as a few of the hit students will be getting a portion of the bounty on several of the high-ranking Shihesaikai members, a sizable amount to say the least. You'll be comfortable. Izuku questioned, and what about Eri? I don't want to abandon her. The 2 adults exchanged nervous looks. As of now Social Services and the Hero Commission are meeting to figure out just what to do in her case. As we don't know who her actual guardians are, she'll be remanded to UA's protection. What can I do to obtain guardianship? Izuku asked, nodding slowly. Bakugo was standing next to Juru, Tokiyami, and Tokage in the principal's office across from their homeroom teachers. Their principal, who looked like a rat, bear, or dog, was pacing on his desk and was smiling warmly throughout his speech. He turned on his heel and pointed at Bakugo, saying jokingly, so let me make sure I have all the facts. You had a potential tip on a missing person and chose not to tell your teacher and instead you alerted a fellow hit student, and then you, he pointed at Juru, also decided not to tell your mentor until you were in danger, during which you lost your phone and stole a civilian truck. Juru muttered haltingly, under the circumstances I decided to back it as we were in danger. Midoriya was the one who stole it, sir. Granted. He murmured, but then, instead of calling your mentor right back, you contacted Tokiyami and Setsuna, only one of whom actually called the people he was supposed to. Tokiyami nodded, and Tokage moaned, though he still wasn't given permission to join and even went against Eraserhead's order to stay back. Not at all sorry, Tokiyami nodded once more, and then you hijacked a train. Tokage defended, we followed proper procedure. As the man slammed his fist into the desk to interrupt her, Vlad yelled, and then you hijacked a train. Proper procedure or not, you hijacked a train. Not only that but you allowed a civilian to tag along under the guise of being a reporter. This made her jump. She was a reporter, Tokiyami stated. She's already sold many of the photos she took, others she's created a website with. Juru whispered, didn't see the website. HMPH, it's all centered around what she got of Deku. The children instantly fell silent when Aizawa said, enough. Bakugo, why didn't you tell authorities about Midoriya? She asked. Laughed. The only reason he was mentioned on the news is because the hag my mother threatened to burn the station down. No precinct would have given 2 shits if I knew where a missing quirkless kid might be, they never cared. Nezu inquired inquisitively, did you know the danger he was in at the time? Bakugo nodded. I just figured the idiot got stuck somewhere during the storm. That's why I thought he'd be at Old Mix. Nezu gave a nod. In the future, please let the teachers know of any situation, no matter how small, and no matter who it includes. Why didn't you alert Gang Orca of your classmate's request? Didn't seem like something I needed to call in. She was truthful. I thought it was just gonna be showing up at Mix, confirming Midoriya was there, and heading home. How was to know he was in that much danger? I called as soon as the situation changed. Aizawa probed, and your reasoning for including Tokiyami and Tokage? I needed backup from someone I trusted. She asserted, we already had confirmation there were local heroes working with the Yakuza. I knew Tokiyami had my back. Setsuna continued, and Izuku was the one that called me. He's my ex. Juru sneered, that explains it. Tokiyami grunted, indeed. Tokage yelled, explains what? Instead, you treated him like he was a particularly slow child who needed someone to hold his hand. Tokiyami responded. At his side, Juru nodded. Bakugo sneered, that's because he is. I did not, Tokage yelled. I was worried about his well-being. Which is more than I can say for you, Juru. You made us leave him behind. Juru yelled angrily, hey, don't put that on me, and turned to face Setsuna, who reciprocated. We could have figured something else out instead of leaving him. Then maybe you should have stayed with him instead of resorting to your go-to and abandoning him. Under Tokiyami's shirt, Dark Shadow started chanting softly, fight, 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 fight. Bakugo and Tokiyami both took a step back as Setsuna flushed with anger. Vlad beat him to it, but Aizawa's eyes flashed and his hand was already reaching for his scarf to separate the two fighting girls. Will you both cut it out? The blood-stained hero strode forward, grabbing the two young heroes by the back of their necks, hauling, and painfully slamming their heads together. Neither of you are to blame for that particular misstep, so stop picking fights, he yelled down at them. Together, the two girls rubbed their heads in agony and said, yes sir. It is evident that both Tokiyami and Juru followed protocol as closely as possible, but I do have to wonder why you didn't call anyone Tokage, Nezu said, continuing as if the interruption had never occurred. I honestly didn't think about it. Tokage admitted as she got herself together, my brother's friend and my ex calls, sounding like he's running from something attacking him, and a little girl yelling in the background. So yeah, I just rushed to Takoba Beach as fast as I could. Well, I think that makes sense, Nezu started. But you'll be grounded for the next week, all of you will be. Aizawa assumed the reins, apart from Tokiyami, who will be getting 3 days. The fact of the matter is, none of you had permission to look into disappearances or act on any information you were given, and any information you had on it should have immediately been brought to your mentors or the teachers of UA. So for the next week, all of you will be responsible for cleaning your respective dorms. And you will come to the school after class to sit through a lecture on proper reporting procedures and provisional license laws with Midnight. They all echoed, yes sir. None of them wanted to aggravate the man further than was necessary. For now, you may go back to the dorms, your homework will be brought to you by your classmates. Vlad sighed. Juru stepped forward and said, we haven't seen Midoriya since they brought him in. Would it be okay if we went to check on him first? Setsuna murmured, he looked rough. Tokiyami bowed his head slightly and said, indeed. Bakugo shifted uneasily. That would be fine. Nezu reassured them that, last I heard he was up and walking. I'm sure he would be thrilled to see some familiar faces while he's here. Juru said, thank you sir, and they walked away. Vlad turned to Nezu and Eraserhead as soon as the door closed, saying, despite not having permission, they still did admirable. They were able to get a VIP through some of the most hostile opposition I've seen since the dark times. Eraserhead sighed reluctantly, but they still did so without authorization, and without notifying us immediately, biased police or not, we would have followed up on the tip. Indeed, and that night was but a small glimpse at what Izuku Midoriya dealt with for the past week. Nezu sighed. Vlad King gave a rough nod, saying, by all accounts he should be dead, especially those last 24 hours. All Might and Naomasa should have some insight on Midoriya's powers. Aizawa responded, they finished his interview 15 minutes ago, they're probably on their way now. Toshinori and Detective Tsukachi strode in as the door opened, seemingly prompted by his words. We were just wondering when you'd get here. Nezu laughed and replied, sit, please, fix yourself a cup of tea. Tsukachi replied, no thank you, as Toshinori filled his own cup. Nezu frowned slightly and turned to face Aizawa. Now, what became of those 2 detectives? He asked. Uniformed officers from the local precinct picked them up. According to Aizawa, they're looking at a few counts of menacing, as well as interfering with a police investigation. With a deep frown, Toshinori continued, The Hero Commission won't be saving these two. I want extra charges thrown in for aggravated assault and mistreatment of a witness. You're quite right about that. Nezu concurred. They'd be in steeper trouble if I thought young Midoriya was capable of sustaining a lawsuit against the Hero Commission. Vlad snorted slightly in rage and growled. To think they were trying to change the narrative to put those heroes in a good light. He called it disgusting. Higari is still in the hospital from Smile Man's surprise attack. Eraserhead murmured. Kamui Woods might be out longer. He was saved by young Yorobi. Toshinori continued. That young man has made leaps and bounds in the hero industry. Very interesting for one without a quirk. Nezu murmured, but we're getting off topic. What did you find out about young Midoriya? Kid didn't lie at all during his interview. Tsukachi started, including the fact that he had no idea how he accessed the super strength he showcased in his fight with the Shi Hesaikai. Vlad sneered, you're kidding. Unfortunately not, Toshinori said with a sigh, running his hand. By all accounts the boy is quirkless. Recovery Girl confirmed it herself, X-rays, quirk factor test. Hell, we even had an independent support company look over the baseball bat. Other than it being dented and pitted beyond saving, it was just a regular bat. It appeared when he went to protect his young ward, Eri. Tsukachi went on, he was able to send granite of the Stone Brothers through 2 buildings, he then buried marble in a crater in what's left of the laundromat. He states from then on he was able to access the strength, having more trouble holding back over anything else. Vlad inquired, how many were killed again? 12. Most of the kills coming from when he destroyed 2 trucks, Tsukachi replied, eyeing All Might with a wince. 8, Nezu explained. 4 by his hand directly, 8 in the truck explosions. Severe head or chest blunt trauma, along with numerous reports of concussions and fractured bones. Has he been exonerated of them all? Aizawa inquired. Yes, he's also accredited the bounties for Rappa, Tengai, the Devil's Trio, and Overhaul. Partial credit going to Kirishima and Melissa Shield for their parts in apprehending their respective villains. Vlad sighed, that's quite a war chest, but why is he getting credit for it? He is not licensed as a hero. These Yakuza thugs have been wanted for a while ever since the 8 Precepts ran into Sir Night-Eye and his protege. After injuring Night-Eye they'd gone underground. No one had seen a hair of them before Eri appeared. Now what? Has the Hero Association taken the girl into custody? Inquired Aizawa. Or did you step in? The final query was directed at Nezu, who gave a warm smile. He glanced at the detective and said, oh, I've definitely stepped in, but I was waiting for Tsukachi's report before making any official moves. What had young Midoriya said about little Eri? He is adamant that he be allowed to take guardianship. He hesitated, I'm not sure how smart. Definitely not. Vlad King cut him off, saying, he's a kid, hardly 16. He is incapable of caring for a 5-year-old. Vlad complained and Aizawa sighed when Toshinori countered, he did a pretty good job the past week. Running from Yakuza hitmen while starving isn't exactly a proving ground for regular parents. Aizawa added, and like Vlad said, he's a child, legally, underage. And yet he's had more jobs than most 20-year-olds. Nezu responded, he dropped out of middle school and didn't even attempt to go into high school, instead devoting his entire time to working to help his mother with bills. He knows responsibility. And he is possibly the only adult figure in young Eri's life that she will truly be comfortable with. Tsukachi attempted to argue, but Nezu interrupted him, saying, you can't seriously be thinking. I am. Not only do we know she'll be comfortable with him, we know he'll protect her no matter what. He is a teenager without a license, Vlad yelled. All technicality he doesn't need a license, as he doesn't have a quirk. However, I can see others not liking that logic, so I'll be extending an invitation to join UA. You really think he can handle UA when he failed middle school? Aizawa inquired. Oh, we'll be sure to do some placement tests to see what can be helped, but I believe this young man's heroic spirit must be nurtured, and your worries about him being underage and taking care of a child can be reassured when he's living on campus. Aizawa said, I don't like it, but I doubt that'll stop you. Nezu laughed and said, oh, you know me too well, Aizawa. WVWVW. The nurse smiled at Izuku as she leapt off her stool and said, now, you'll still be sore for the next few days, so I want you to take it easy as much as you can, okay? Izuku sighed in relief as Recovery Girl healed the last of his injuries. As Eri climbed into Izuku's lap and settled with a small stuffed bear that Recovery Girl had found for her, Izuku saluted languidly, yes ma'am. As Recovery Girl offered them some gummies, Izuku put a gentle arm around her and squeezed her while she reassured him, they'll help with your energy. He took some, and Eri soon followed. I appreciate it, Recovery Girl. Have they mentioned what comes next? He inquired. Before jumping off and heading to her office for some paperwork, she patted his arm and reassured him, "Nothing yet, dearie, but I'm sure Nezu will call you up soon, just relax until then." Eri started tracing the scars he had sustained from his numerous breaks over the past few weeks while Izuku sat silently for a while, palm up. "We match now," she muttered, looking up at him. "We do," he said, stroking her hair while keeping an eye on her horn. "Are you cool with that?" As she sniffed, fat tears welling up in her eyes, she said, "It's all my fault that you shouldn't have been hurt." "It's definitely not your fault," Izuku responded. "You had no control in this situation, you're a kid, and you shouldn't have had to worry about any of this. Overhaul is responsible for everything, he's at fault for everything that's happened. Don't help him by trying to take the blame." "It's all right, Eri," Izuku muttered softly, closing his eyes and letting his head rest against the pillows behind him. "It's not your fault, it will never be your fault. And I will never blame you for what happened." She sniffed once more, and Izuku pulled her in for a gentle embrace, holding her against his chest as she began to cry. Eri sobbed for a few moments before dozing off against his chest and burying herself in Izuku's side while holding her new teddy bear. "Midoriya, are you awake?" Izuku opened his eyes and looked languidly at the students who were now gathered by his bed. "Rockstar," he said softly, "I'm happy to hear that you're all okay, Tokyo, Setsuna." "Thanks to you," Tokiyami said, nodding his head, "we heard what you did for Kirishima." Izuku looked at Setsuna and laughed, saying, "Rockhead saved my ass too. You good Set?" he asked. She gave him a weary smile and said, "Yeah, just wanted to make sure you're fine. I know Aki will be relieved." He asked, "They make it back from Hawaii yet?" With a start, Set questioned, "You didn't hear?" "Hear what?" He was also in a really positive frame of mind. Bakugo first said, "John Henry was ambushed by Vent and Quill," as he crossed his arms and stared at the wall. "Kamui Woods warned him just in time, but both got injured. Yorobe's got second-degree burns and a few stab wounds from those quills. Setsuna assumed command, but he should be released today, if he's an OT already." "More traitors," Izuku muttered, shaking his head in disgust. "That makes 4 that I know of." 12 in all, Jiru stated. 4 of them were found out earlier today in a surprise internal investigation. Izuku complained, unconsciously clenching his fist. "Assholes tried to pin everything on me. Was lucky Detective Tsukachi was there with Eraserhead. Better count 2 Hero Association grunts as well." "What the hell?" Setsuna questioned angrily. "They tried to do what?" Eri yawned as she rubbed her eyes and sat up slowly after being startled awake. Setsuna covered her mouth and whispered, "Crap." The slowly waking girl turned her sleepy red eyes to Jiru, who said, "How you doin' half pint?" When Eri realized who was there, her eyes brightened significantly and she exclaimed, "Oh, Kyo. I'm fine, and hello, Toko and Set." Izuku glanced between the 4 and hummed a question. As Tokiyami pulled an apple out of nowhere and held it out to Eri, Jiru explained, "Easiest way for her to remember our names." "Thank you." Eri exclaimed with delight as she took the apple gently and bit into it, feeling waves of satisfaction wash over her. Tokiyami handed Izuku an apple as well, saying, "I figured you'd be hungry." The exhausted teenager gratefully bit into it, mumbling, "Hey, thanks," in between bites. "Setsuna, so what happens now?" Izuku wiped his hands on a napkin and tossed it in the trash, saying, "Now, I wait until Nezu calls me to tell me the plan moving forward. No matter what, Eri's staying with me, I won't accept any other deal." Carefully, Setsuna questioned, "Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I have the strength to take on any lingering Yakuza bastards who think they can come snooping around," he said firmly, adding, "I've dealt with worse." "How exactly are you so strong?" When Izuku looked at Bakugo for the first time during that encounter, his eyes were cold and so different from the melancholy he was accustomed to that he unconsciously stepped back. Bakugo growled, his fists clenching. Izuku finally shrugged and said, "I already told you I have no idea how it came around, and it hasn't gone away yet, so I'm optimistic. Beats me." "Is it a peculiarity? Maybe you're a medical marvel, late bloomer at 15, Jiru inquired. 16, thank you very much." Izuku sighed, "And according to Recovery Girl and who knows how many tests, I'm still biologically quirkless, so whatever this is, it's not a quirk." Jiru rolled her eyes when Tokiyami wisely remarked, "An interesting conundrum if there ever were one." "Well, quirk or no, you really came in clutch when we needed you." Jiru responded, "You should think about applying to UA, you'd make a great hero." Everyone smiled at the girl when Eri chirped, "Papa already is a hero." "That he is," Tokiyami replied. "However, a hero must complete tasks to show the world he is one. Your papa has already completed one. Ua would help him complete the others." "I doubt Ua is in the cards," Izuku murmured. "Besides, I got a good job at the gas station." "Oh yes, because bagging groceries pays so much better than being a hero." Bakugo laughed. "Katsuki, what are you even doing here? I doubt you're here asking after my health," Izuku said. Juru and Tokiyami stepped back a little as they glared at one another while Setsuna glanced between them anxiously. "HMPH, Mom would want to know you're at least up and talking," he murmured, "and it's better than going to the dorms to start my probation early." "Probation?" Izuku asked. "Yeah, technically none of us had permission to go looking for you, or help get you to UA. Juru replied sheepishly, "And we weren't able to contact everyone we were supposed to. I failed to contact Aizawa. Bakugo failed to contact anyone, and Tokiyami ignored orders to stay put." Izuku grinned at the boy with the bird's head and said, "Ah, you broke the law for me." Tokiyami closed his eyes and bowed his head, saying, "The darkness cannot be contained." Then a dark shadow appeared from beneath his sweater, and he snickered. "Yami's a big softy." He was worried about the kid. Dark shadow. Juru snickered as Tokiyami snarled, his cheeks flaring like feathers. "Izu, who knew you had so many friends?" Izuku jumped up right away and said, "Yorobi," as the big man lumbered over with Aki by his side. The big man wasted no time in embracing Izuku tightly, dragging Eri along for the ride. "I'm glad you're safe, little brother." As he swung his friend around like a rag doll, he roared, fat tears of relief streaming down his cheeks. "We couldn't find a flight back quickly enough when we learned you were missing. Then Set discovered you were fighting Yakuza when he called Aki. Oh my god, apologies." Sheepishly, he said, dropping Izuku back on the bed. Eri fell onto the mattress, swirly-eyed, and the boy gasped for air. "I'm glad you're okay," Izuku said, wheezing as he slowly stood up and gave the man a firm embrace. "I heard what happened with Vent and Quill." "Ah, that was nothing." Yorobi grinned as he released Izuku from his embrace, allowing Aki to take his place and give him a bone-crushing embrace. "Word goes around the block that you got rid of most of the 8 precepts in one night." As Aki took a step back, Izuku said absently, "I'm sure that's an exaggeration," while scratching the side of his nose. "I had a lot of help." "Yeah right," Juru grumbled. "Princess here took out 2 trucks within 5 minutes of me meeting him." "I'm Yorobi Shirahama, Izuku's brother," he said, squatting down to be more eye-level with Eri. "I didn't mean to be so loud," he said, quickly controlling his laughter when he saw her flinch from where she was sitting up on the bed. "Brother?" she asked, turning to face Izuku, who nodded in agreement. "You Uncle Yoro?" she asked. Yorobi hugged her tenderly and said, "Yes, I'm your Uncle Yoro, and this is your Uncle Aki." His heart tightened. "Yorobi, if she's not comfortable calling me that," Aki said. "Uncle Aki." Sniff. "Aki, are you crying?" Setsuna exclaimed, looking at her brother, who was now embracing Yorobi with tears streaming down his cheeks. "No I'm not," he screamed. "Shut up." Bakugo sneered and started to leave, saying, "I'm out of here. This lovey-dovey crap is making me sick." Izuku watched him leave, then sighed and stood up. "I'll be right back, Eri," he said, smiling reassuringly at her when she appeared a little anxious, but Juru and her newly nicknamed uncles quickly allayed her fears. To catch up with Bakugo, Izuku ran painfully. "Hey," he called, causing Katsuki to halt his stride. "I know I was a bit of an ass, but seriously, thanks for sending someone," he said earnestly. "Really saved my ass out there, Kachan." Bakugo muttered, "Don't make a habit of it," and went back to his stroll, calling himself a shitty nerd. Izuku rolled his eyes and said, "Still an asshole," loud enough to be heard by Bakugo. He said, "At least that'll never change." He then returned to the infirmary, grinning as he noticed Eri gazing up at Yorobi in awe as he recounted the tale of how he defeated Stain to everyone who was still present. Walking through Mustafu's streets unharmed, without Yakuza to pursue him or paid heroes attempting to hand him over to them, felt unreal. He could go get groceries and move with ease. As easy as he could, considering how many people were staring at him. Every step he takes is followed by whispers. "Isn't that? It is, Metal Bat. You think he's on patrol? No way, he's not a hero, remember? Maybe he's doing it in spite of that. Guys, he's got groceries, maybe calm down." When he arrived at his apartment complex, Izuku rolled his eyes and walked 2 steps at a time until he reached his door. He raised an eyebrow when he noticed Eraserhead leaning against the wall and said, I already told him, I haven't decided on anything yet. He then unlocked his door and entered. Classes start in a few days, after all, Aizawa said, replacing him, so he needs your response soon. Before a reprimanding hand slapped the back of his head, he asked, who said you were invited in? He moaned, ow, as Aki rounded the corner. He smiled and said, good morning, Eraserhead. There's a fresh pot of coffee in the kitchen. The man with the shaggy hair said, thank you, with a rare smile on his face as he crept into the somewhat busy kitchen, where half of the small table was covered in papers, and the other half was filled with freshly prepared breakfast food. As Izuku started putting the groceries away, Aki inquired, are you hungry? John Henry will be here soon for breakfast. The coffee will be enough, Aizawa assured, looking at the papers while he set up his thermos. Placement tests? He asked, turning to face Izuku, who averted his gaze. Nezu sent them over, figured it wouldn't hurt to take them. He grumbled, not much else to do since I got fired for my week vacation. With a plate of eggs and sausage in front of him, Aki said empathetically, I still can't believe Mr. Ken would do that to you. Izuku muttered mockingly, rain or shine, villain attack or not, and then he sighed, stroking his hair. It's fine, he said, attempting to sound positive, the money from the bounties will keep the bills paid for the next several months, and I can find work in that time frame. Aizawa then started, if you join Ua, Izuku whispered, drop it. Aizawa raised his hands in surrender. I'm just saying, Izuku took another deep breath and snapped, well don't say it. Aki gave him a warning look and he said, slowly and gritting his teeth, I know, how serious this decision is. But I can't just go jumping into this half-cocked. I've been out of classes for a year, I'm so far behind everyone else it's not even funny, so please, let me figure it out on my own. After hesitating, Aizawa nodded and remarked, especially since you seem so unwilling. Truthfully, I don't understand why Nezu is pushing it so hard. Not unwilling. Izuku replied quietly, this is my dream school we're talking about, he breathed deeply, it all feels like a dream. Like at any moment it's gonna be pulled away from me in some cruel joke. The principal isn't one to pull those kinds of pranks. Aizawa added, he wants you in his school, for whatever reason, and while I may not be your biggest supporter, I won't lie and say your chance is worse than anyone else's. You have the potential to match Melissa Shield in terms of raw strength, and your ability to think under pressure is definitely a bonus. Izuku whispered, I sense a, but, somewhere in there. But, there it is, you're untrained, as you've said you've been out of school for over a year. To catch up alone would take up the majority of your time while in your first semester. Izuku sighed and wiped his face, saying, and I know all of that. Someone is going to tell me something I don't know one day. As a door down the hall opened, Aizawa stood and rolled his eyes. With her eyes half closed and a heavy blanket wrapped around her petite frame, Eri crept into the kitchen in silence. She climbed into Izuku's lap with awkward, clambering steps and fell asleep before her head even touched his chest. Izuku grinned a little and moved her just enough to allow him to keep eating. Aizawa asked softly, not wanting to wake the young girl, how has she been? She's not jumping at shadows anymore. Izuku replied, no telling how she'd do outside of the house, but she knows this is a safe place. Aki interrupted, sitting down with his own plate and starting to eat, she's also comfortable enough to stay with me in Yorobi while Izuku goes off doing whatever he's been doing the past 2 weeks. Izuku clarified, Ua or not, I gotta pay bills, job hunting. When Izuku glared at him, Aizawa held up his hand and said, only with Ua there's a work-study program that can help with that. Relax, he droningly said, that's free information, and another factor to consider in your choice. With a sigh, Izuku resumed his meal. The apartment was quiet until the front door opened, and Eri looked up at the sound. Yorobi, wearing his hero uniform of a plate carrier, blue jeans, and brown boots, said, morning all. He had his hammer dangling from a belt loop. Izuku murmured, morning John, while biting into a pancake. Aki stood and kissed his fiancée's cheek, saying, morning sweetie, food's ready. He returned the kiss and went to fix a plate, saying, awesome. Eraserhead, always a pleasure. Always. How was the night shift? Aizawa agreed drearily. Slow. He complained, with the Shi Hesaikai defunct, most criminals have ducked their heads. That won't last. Aizawa warned that vacuum in power has to be filled sooner or later. John ruffled Izuku's hair and sat down with his plate, teasing him, and I'm sure Metal Bat here will smash them right back to the Edo era. Oh yeah, I'll just go be a vigilante real quick and make sure there's peace in Mustafu forevermore. Izuku sighed. That's what the word on the street is, you've become a folk hero, kid. And I can't wait to die into obscurity. I've had to outrun those news vultures 3 times now. Gods forbid they find my actual address. Aizawa jumped to his feet and reassured him, if they do, just call the cops. They have no authority to be hanging around places like this. They'll disperse as soon as any kind of authority does show up. The dark-clad hero departed after saying, I have to go. Kid, Nezu is giving you until the end of the week. Come to a decision by then. When Eri eventually turned around in his arms, Izuku ate in silence and grinned. Will we get to see the funny bear again? She asked softly, her eyes gleaming a little. Yep, Izuku replied, we can do anything you want until the end of the week. Barring this afternoon. Eri's head cocked. You'll be staying with Yorobi and Aki, who will make sure you're safe, right? I have to turn these papers in, he said. Okay, she said hesitantly, but she had become somewhat used to having someone watch out for her now that Izuku had given that responsibility to multiple people. Have you thought about it? Yorobi questioned him. I have. Have you made up your mind? I haven't. Rolling his eyes, Yorobi reprimanded, gotta come to a decision sooner or later. After finishing his meal, Izuku got up and carefully set Eri down on the table, saying, that seems to be the general consensus. Hungry, Eri? Why yes. Let's get you a plate fixed up then. Yorobi and Aki exchanged glances while Izuku busied himself feeding Eri. WVWVW before boarding the train back into downtown Mustafu. He gave Hound Dog the placement tests at the gate and promised a therapy session as soon as he made up his mind. The streets were tense, with heroes crawling around like army ants and nearly everyone he passed having some sort of damage fixed. Needless to say, crime was at an all-time low for however long they would be here. They all raised a friendly hand to him as he approached, but Izuku was more worried about the older men slowly clearing the burned-out storefront than he was about that. The youngest of them was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, Midoriya. He put his bat on his shoulder and said, hey guys, thinking he would have it with him in case something went wrong. Izuku immediately started assisting them in clearing out the damaged store, and some were already starting to replace the electrical and burnt boards. Haven't seen you since before the blizzard. Been busy, he mildly remarked. How is Mick doing? He's all right, son, should be by this afternoon. Glad you came by to give a hand. Always happy to help Mick, especially since this is my fault. What? They all gave him a startled look. The Yakuza were pursuing me because I was defending a young girl. Because he assisted me, they set the place on fire. The Shi Hesaikai had honor back in my day, said one of the older men, shaking his head. Despicable, he complained, burning a place down over a little girl. Another patted Izuku's back and said, you know Mick's willing to take whatever rap he's got to help quirkless like us. This means we help him whenever we can as well, so set aside your self-pity and let's get this place spruced up. They quickly resumed their work after Izuku nodded and smiled, and by the time old Mick hobbled into the store, everything had returned to normal. Mick, welcome back. To the old man's delight, they all joined in chorus. Did you all do this for me? I'll never be able to repay you all, he said with a cheerful smile and a little giggle as the oldest of them stepped forward to give him a back pat. Izuku stepped forward and said, same to you Mick. The man's smile grew as he gave the boy a shoulder pat. Izuku. I feared those monsters would get hold of you. Looking around, he said, I'm glad you made it, son. Where's John Henry? Usually, that boy doesn't miss events like this. He's taking care of that little girl, Izuku reassured, I asked him to. Best not have her in a place like this again, he said, nodding. Needs more protection. Did you give those bastards what for? All of the men were suddenly very interested in his response, which made Izuku laugh. One pushed him, saying, heard you sent a couple through some buildings. You awakened a quirk or something? Sincerely, Izuku stated, I have no idea what it is. I've just been stronger since that night. So you were that? I told Lin it was, but she didn't believe me, one of them exclaimed with a triumphant cheer. It's difficult to believe. I mean, everyone here is quirkless, for one to suddenly have power like that, said another. John Henry became a hero, Mick reiterated to them. Yeah, but he's always been a bruiser. Izuku's strong, don't get me wrong, but I didn't think. Izuku leaned against the counter and placed an envelope casually on it, saying, you and me both. And now I got an invitation to try my luck at UA. I just don't know if I should. One person nodded and adjusted his glasses, asking, so old Nezu invited you EH? If he has something positive to say about you, then I'm sure you deserve it. Still, he hasn't had schooling in over a year, he'll be behind. How about you boys go gossip in the back? Mick replied sharply, I'm sure that old refrigerator is stocked up, so get to it. The middle-aged man ushered all the elderly men into the back, still discussing Izuku's prospects, and said, right, let's go fellas. Mick laughed, sorry the gossips, and walked around the counter to make sure everything was there before wincefully sitting down on a stool. So, you don't know if you'll accept? He asked. Yeah, I don't even know what this power is, not to mention I'm a year behind. He smiled as he looked at the envelope and pushed it back to Izuku, saying, fair, but you're a hard-working guy, you'd be able to catch up. Use that for that little girl, get her room stocked with everything she needs. Nah, I owe you for what happened. The Yakuza owe me, you owe me nothing. He cut him off, waved him off, now, if you want to give me something, give me bragging rights on knowing the next #1 hero. At that, Izuku began, saying, next number now hold on a minute. You got the drive and the will to succeed. He disconnected him once more, not only that, but now you got the strength to back it up, unknown power or hidden quirk, whatever it turns out to be, it's yours, and the way I see it, you're not one to sit idly by anyways. So I say you go out, grip this by the horns, and become the greatest hero ever. Blinking, Izuku said, what if I fail? He smiled and clapped the boy's shoulders, saying, then you get up and try again, we'll all be there to cheer you on. Come on, do it for us old quirkless fools, who never could quite get there. Izuku was beaming. I have a meeting with Nezu Friday, I still think I'm a fool for trying. You'll figure it out, he replied, for now, let's go join the others for a drink Izuku nodded, trying to conceal his lingering doubts with a smile. WVWVW. Damn. Guess I was wrong. This definitely wasn't Cabbagehead's doin'. Still, wonder who did it. He looked around for a while before continuing his walk, saying, I'm sure if I stick around, I'll run into whoever it was, sooner or later. A few streets away, a lanky blonde walked down the street with his hands in the pockets of his leather pants, his ruffled white shirt the only thing keeping the cold at bay as he smoked a cigarette at the corner of his mouth.
So this was it for the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.